I paid $500 for an abandoned train station everyone in town wanted to forget. I thought I was buying a roof over my head for me and my retired German Shepherd Rook. But 11 minutes after we walked inside, he started growling at a floorboard that sounded hollow underneath. What we found below that station had been sealed away for more than half a century, and before the sun went down, a stranger offered me $100,000 to stop looking. If you enjoy stories about loyalty, courage, and the bond between a veteran and his dog, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. It helps us keep bringing you stories worth listening to. By the time Rook started growling at the floor, I had owned Cinder Gap Station for 11 minutes. That should tell you something about my luck. The place had no electricity, half the windows were boarded shut, and the roof sagged over the eastern freight room like an old mule carrying too much weight. Wind came through cracks in the brick and pushed 50 years of coal dust across the floor in thin gray ribbons. The county had called the building structurally questionable. The locals called it cursed. I called it mine. I had paid $500 for it at a tax auction that morning, which was approximately $490 more than anyone else in the room thought it was worth. Rook disagreed. My German Shepherd stood in the middle of the abandoned baggage room with his nose pointed toward a section of warped oak flooring. He was 7 years old, 86 pounds, black over the back and shoulders, deep tan through the legs and chest. The gray around his muzzle had started showing that winter. His left ear stood straight, his right ear leaned slightly outward from an old injury. When Rook looked at something seriously, that damaged ear made him seem almost curious. He was not curious then, he was working. I set down my thermos. "What is it?" He did not look at me. His nose moved once, then twice. He stepped forward and pressed one paw against the floor. There was a sound beneath us. Not a rat, not running water, not settling timber, a hollow metallic knock. Rook froze. So did I. Then it came again, one knock, a pause, two more. I wish I could tell you I reacted like the man I used to be. I did not. For half a second, the station disappeared. The cold West Virginia morning disappeared. I smelled hot stone, burned wiring, and dust thick enough to chew. Somewhere very far away, a man was screaming my name from behind a collapsed concrete wall. Then Rook leaned his shoulder into my knee, not gently. He nearly moved me a full step. I looked down. His brown eyes were on me now. "Yeah," I whispered. The station came back, the broken windows. The wind, the dust, the ridiculous $500 deed folded inside my jacket. I put my hand against the side of Rook's neck. "I'm here." His tail moved once, that was all. I had spent almost 30 years learning how quickly a life could change. What I did not know was that mine was about to change because a dog had heard something beneath the floor everyone else had forgotten. My name is Wade Callahan. I was 57 years old that winter. For 22 years I served in the United States Navy, most of them in the SEAL teams. That sentence sounds impressive when someone else says it. It sounds different when you are saying it from the cab of a 12-year-old pickup truck with everything you own packed beneath a blue tarp in the bed. People imagine men like me leave the service with a plan. Some do. I left with a pension, a damaged right shoulder, 3 good suits I never wore, and the belief that if I kept moving fast enough, certain memories would get tired before I did. Memories have better endurance than people give them credit for. After the Navy, I worked private security for a while, then industrial safety, then maritime training. I was good at all of it until I stopped sleeping. After that, I became good at pretending. There is a difference. My marriage survived 2 wars, 9 deployments, and more missed anniversaries than I care to admit. It did not survive the man I became after I came home for good. Linda did not leave because she stopped loving me. That would have been easier. She left because loving me had turned into standing outside a locked room and asking whether I was going to come out. Our daughter, Emily, was grown by then. She had her own life in Ohio, a husband and a little boy named Noah who knew me mostly as the grandfather who mailed birthday cards 3 days late. I told myself distance was protecting them. Men can build elegant reasons around cowardice. Mine were first class. Then, 3 years before I bought Cinder Gap Station, I met Rook. He had never been my military dog. That matters. People hear former Navy SEAL and German Shepherd and imagine we parachuted into some desert together. We did not. Rook had worked with a county sheriff's search and rescue unit in Virginia. His handler developed a neurological illness that ended his career, and Rook was retired earlier than anyone expected. He did not handle retirement well. Neither did I. A friend introduced us because he thought two unpleasant former government employees might enjoy disappointing each other. For the first 3 days, Rook ignored me. On the 4th, he stole half my turkey sandwich. On the 5th, he slept beside the door of my apartment. 2 months later, when I woke on the kitchen floor, after a nightmare so violent, I had knocked over a chair and cracked my cheek against a cabinet, Rook lay across my legs until my breathing slowed. He never had to be trained to do that. Some dogs learn commands. Some learn people. Rook learned the places inside me where commands no longer worked. By the winter I came to Cinder Gap. We had been living out of my truck and a cheap camper shell for almost 4 months. I was not completely homeless, that is what I told myself. I had a vehicle, I had blankets, I had a propane stove. I had a gym membership, mostly for the shower. Words can become curtains if you hang them carefully enough. Behind the curtain, the truth was simpler. I had nowhere to go. Then I saw the auction notice. Cinder Gap Station had been built in 14 in a narrow valley south of an old mining community called Bellwether. Once, coal trains had stopped there every day. By the time I arrived, the passenger line was gone. The freight spur ended beneath blackberry vines, and young trees had grown between the rails. The depot sat on 3 acres beside a creek the color of dark tea. There was a ticket office, a freight room, a small second floor, and an attached warehouse with a roof that had partially collapsed. The county wanted it gone. Demolition would cost money. Preservation would cost more. So they put it into a tax auction with enough warnings attached to frighten anyone who owned a calculator. I attended because it was warm inside the courthouse. That is the embarrassing truth. I had parked 2 streets over and left Rook sleeping in the truck because dogs were not permitted inside. The auction was held in a room with fluorescent lights that made everyone look guilty. There were 12 people there. Most wanted cheap parcels, foreclosures, little strips of mountain land, or houses with repairable roofs. Then the clerk reached Cinder Gap Station. Nobody raised a hand. She lowered the opening bid. Nobody moved. She lowered it again. A man behind me chuckled. The clerk looked tired. $500. I do not know why I lifted my hand. Maybe I was cold. Maybe I was tired of sleeping in a truck. Maybe part of me wanted a building so broken that no one could accuse me of being the worst thing inside it. The clerk stared at me. 500? I should have lowered my hand. Instead, yes ma'am. No one bid against me. A few people actually laughed. That is how I became the owner of a condemned railroad depot for the price of a used lawnmower. When I came outside, Rook was sitting upright behind the windshield. I opened the driver's door. I bought us a house. He stared at me. It has historical character, still staring. Most of the roof is technically present. Rook sneezed. I don't need that attitude. An elderly man walking past heard me and said, "If you bought that old Cinder Gap place, the dog has the better judgment." Then he kept walking. That should have been warning number 1. Warning number 2 arrived when I stopped at a diner on the road to Bellwether. The place was called Patty's Table, red vinyl booths. A pie case near the register. Coffee strong enough to remove rust. I ordered eggs, potatoes, toast, and a hamburger patty without seasoning for Rook. The waitress was a woman in her late 60s named Lorraine. Her silver hair was pulled into a knot, and she wore white sneakers that squeaked every time she turned. She saw the deed envelope beside my coffee. "You bought something today?" Cinder Gap Station. Her coffee pot stopped halfway toward my cup. There are silences people choose. Then there are silences that choose them. This was the second kind. "You bought the depot for $500. Lorraine slowly filled my cup. "County should have paid you." "So I've heard." She looked toward the kitchen. 2 older men in a booth behind me had stopped talking. I noticed because quiet has a shape when you have spent enough years listening for danger. I turned slightly. One of the men looked away. The other did not. He was maybe 75, narrow through the shoulders, with a brown work jacket and hands swollen at the knuckles. He asked, "You planning to tear it down?" planning to keep the rain off me first. Something in his face relaxed. Do that. Lorraine gave him a look. He returned to his coffee. I waited. Nobody offered anything else. Rook's hamburger arrived. He ate it in approximately 6 seconds. When Lorraine brought my check, she placed it upside down on the table. Then she bent a little closer. You find papers in there. Don't throw them away. I looked at her. What papers? She straightened. I didn't say there were papers. You just told me not to throw them away. Old buildings collect things. So do old towns. Her expression changed only slightly. You military? I nodded. Does that matter? Depends on what you think a promise is worth. Before I could ask what she meant, a family came through the door, bringing cold air and 3 noisy children with them. Lorraine walked away. I paid the bill. When I looked back from the entrance, the elderly man in the brown jacket was watching Rook. Not me. Rook watched him back. The drive to the station took 19 minutes. Cinder Gap was narrower than I expected. Mountains rose on both sides, bare with winter, their ridges dark beneath a pale sky. Small houses stood along the road with wood smoke curling from chimneys. Some had Christmas decorations still hanging, even though January was nearly over. Then the valley tightened. The creek appeared beside the road. And there was the station. The photographs from the auction had been generous. Up close, it looked as though weather had been trying to eat it for decades and had simply become bored before finishing. The brick walls were stained black near the old loading platform. Several windows were broken. Rust covered the metal awning supports. The station sign still hung beneath the eave, Cinder Gap. White letters on a black board faded almost gray. Rook jumped from the truck and stood still, his nose lifted. Wind came down the valley. He smelled the creek first. Then the trees, then the building. His body changed. Only a little. Most people would not have noticed. I did. Easy, he walked toward the station. I followed with the key. The front door resisted until I put my shoulder into it. Dust drifted from the frame. Inside, cold air smelled of old wood, mouse droppings, wet plaster, and something mineral I could not identify. Sunlight entered through gaps in the boards covering the windows. The waiting room still had 3 wooden benches bolted to the floor. A schedule board hung crooked on one wall. Someone had written a name in pencil beneath it decades earlier. Margaret. I brushed dust from the letters. That was the first name Cinder Gap gave me. I did not know then how many more were underneath my feet. Rook moved room to room while I checked walls, windows, and floor stability. The old ticket office was small but dry. The second floor had 2 rooms that might once have been offices. One still contained a steel filing cabinet rusted shut. The freight side was worse. Water had destroyed sections of plaster. A portion of ceiling had fallen. The wood floor bowed near the south wall. I was deciding where I could safely put a cot when Rook walked past me. He entered the baggage room, stopped, turned, walked out. Then went back in. That caught my attention. Rook did not waste movement. I followed. The baggage room was perhaps 20 feet long and half as wide. Empty shelves ran along one wall. A faded yellow line had been painted across the floor near an old scale. Rook lowered his nose. He tracked along the eastern wall. Then across the floor, then back. His breathing changed. What are you getting? He ignored me. At first I assumed rodents. Then I saw his posture. Rook had been trained for human scent, both living and deceased. That does not mean a dog understands death the way we do. It means scent tells a story the human nose is too stupid to read. He stopped over one board, sniffed, moved 3 feet. Stopped again. Then he looked at me. I crouched. The floorboards were old oak, blackened by dirt. Nothing unusual. I knocked with my knuckles, solid. I moved a few inches, knocked again, solid. Then I reached the place beneath Rook's paw. Knock hollow. I tried another spot, hollow again. Well, Rook's ears moved. Beneath the floor came the metallic sound I told you about. 1 knock, pause, 2 knocks, every muscle in my back tightened. Then came the memory, the tunnel, the collapse. Petty Officer Aaron Voss on the other side of concrete. I could not move. Aaron had been 34. He had a wife named Celia and twin daughters who could not pronounce my last name. He had been alive for 7 minutes after the wall came down. Maybe 8. For years I had argued with myself about that final minute. Men who survive things become accountants of impossible time. I had heard Aaron knocking, 3 strikes, pause, 3 strikes. We had been digging toward him when the secondary collapse started. I gave the order to pull back. That order saved 4 men. Aaron died behind the wall. A board of officers told me I had made the correct decision. Correct decisions can still wake you at 3 in the morning. Rook pushed into my leg. I grabbed the windowsill. Not the same place, I said aloud. His eyes stayed. Not the same wall, he waited. My breathing slowed. That was our arrangement. He never asked me to forget. He only insisted I remain in the room where my body actually was. I found a pry bar in the truck. The first floorboard refused to move. The second cracked. Under the third, my flashlight showed black space. Cold air rose through the opening. Rook sniffed hard. There was something beneath the baggage room. Not a crawl space. Something deeper. I removed another board, then another. A steel beam appeared. Beside it was the edge of what looked like an iron hatch. Someone had covered it deliberately. I cleared dirt with my glove. The hatch was approximately 3 feet wide and nearly 4 feet long. Its hinges were thick. A lifting ring lay flat in the center. And across the iron, beneath rust and coal dust, someone had painted a single word. Ward. He stared at it. Hospital ward. Rook sniffed the gap. Then backed away. That bothered me more than the hatch. Rook was willing to investigate almost anything when I asked. Now his ears flattened slightly. A low vibration started in his chest. Rook. He looked toward the outer wall, not the hatch. The wall. Then I heard an engine outside, not an old pickup. Not a logging truck, something quiet. Expensive. I stood. Through a crack between the boards covering the window, I saw a black sport utility vehicle pull beside my truck. Clean enough to reflect the bare trees, it looked like it had arrived from economy. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He wore a dark wool coat over a suit. Mid-40s, maybe younger. His hair was neatly cut, his shoes inappropriate for mud, his expression calm. He looked at my truck, then at the station, then directly at the boarded baggage room window where I was standing. He could not see me, at least he should not have been able to. But he smiled. Rook moved in front of me. Stay, he did. I walked outside. The man waited beside his vehicle. You Wade Callahan? Depends who's asking. He smiled a little wider. Mr. Callahan, my name is Gideon Rowe. I represent Hawthorne Consolidated. The name meant nothing to me. It would soon mean far too much. Congratulations on your purchase. I looked at the station. Word travels fast. Small county. You drove a long way for local gossip. His smile weakened by half a degree. Good. I'll be brief. My company has a historical interest in this property. Then your company should have bid $600. We weren't aware the county intended to dispose of it this morning. It was advertised for 3 months, so I understand. The wind moved his coat. Rook stood at my left knee. Gideon looked down. Rook looked back. Beautiful dog. He knows. Gideon reached into his coat. My body responded before my mind did. His hand stopped. He noticed. People always noticed. Slowly he removed a business card. He held it between 2 fingers. I'd like to buy the station. I've owned it less than an hour. Which means you haven't had time to become sentimental. That's convenient. We'll give you $25,000. I laughed. I did not mean to. It simply came out. The county could not give the place away that morning. Now a man in a wool coat was offering 50 times what I had paid before I had even unpacked my sleeping bag. Gideon did not laugh. That was when the conversation became interesting. Why strategic land consolidation? For what? Future development. There isn't a working rail line within miles. Development takes many forms. I looked at the company card, but did not take it. Gideon finally lowered his hand. His eyes went past me towards the station. Not the roof, not the old loading platform, the baggage room side. Did you come inside before I got here? I asked. No. You ever been here? Years ago. How many? He paused. Long enough that I doubt the answer matters. Rook made a sound. Very low. Gideon's eyes dropped to him. Rook was not growling. He was smelling. His nose lifted toward Gideon's right trouser leg. The man's composure changed. Only for a moment. He took 1 step backward. Rook stepped forward. Rook, hold. The dog stopped. Gideon looked at me. Is he trained? More than most people. For drugs? No. What then? I let the silence sit there. Gideon looked at Rook again. His jaw tightened. Then, from inside the station, something fell. A hard metallic crash echoed through the freight room. Rook spun toward the building. Gideon did too. and there it was. Not surprise, recognition. The man knew what was under that floor. I saw it as clearly as if he had confessed. He recovered quickly. "You should be careful in there," he said. "The building has a complicated history." "What kind?" "Industrial accidents, structural instability. Things no sensible person should disturb without professionals." I stepped closer. "What exactly shouldn't I disturb?" He looked at me for a long time. Then he finally handed me the card. I took it. On the front were his name and the words Hawthorne Consolidated, Regional Land Division. On the back he had written a number by hand, $100,000. My pulse slowed. People think fear makes the heart race. Sometimes training does the opposite. The world becomes very quiet. "You just offered 25. I've reconsidered." 4 times? It's a difficult property. Then why do you want it? His gaze moved once more toward the station. When he answered, the friendly voice was gone. "Because some buildings become more expensive after people start asking the wrong questions." Wind pushed dead leaves across the abandoned tracks. Rook moved beside me. Gideon opened his vehicle door. Before getting in, he stopped. "Mr. Callahan, yeah? If you found an access point in the baggage room, do not open it." I said nothing. Gideon seemed to realize his mistake at exactly the same moment I did. He had never been inside. I had never mentioned a baggage room. And I certainly had not mentioned an access point. His face hardened. He got into the vehicle and drove away. I stood beside the tracks until the black sport utility vehicle disappeared around the mountain. Then I looked down at the business card, $100,000. I had less than $900 in my bank account. My truck needed tires. My shoulder needed treatment I had been postponing. I had spent the previous night beneath a camper shell while sleet tapped against the roof. $100,000 could have bought me warmth. It could have bought me time. It could have bought me enough dignity to call my daughter and tell her I had finally stopped drifting. I put the card in my pocket. Then Rook barked once from the station door. "Yeah, I know." He went inside. I followed. The baggage room seemed colder now. The boards I had removed lay beside the opening. Rook stood over the iron hatch. I knelt and brushed away more rust. The word Ward was clearer. Then I noticed something beneath it. Smaller letters. Not painted. Scratched into the iron by hand. I wiped them with my sleeve. There were 6 words. "If they say 7, they lied." I read the sentence twice. Rook lowered his nose to the seam around the hatch. This time, beneath the mineral smell and coal dust, I caught something even my human nose could recognize. Old oil, wet iron, and a faint trace of air coming from somewhere deep under the station. I wrapped my fingers around the lifting ring. It did not move. I pulled harder. Nothing. Then Rook suddenly turned toward the far corner. His body went rigid. I followed his gaze. Behind a stack of rotten wooden pallets was a section of brick wall darker than the rest. Rook crossed the room and scratched once. A brick shifted. I moved the pallets. Behind them was not a wall. It was a doorway that someone had bricked shut from the outside. And near the bottom, half hidden beneath mortar, was a small brass plate. I cleaned it with my thumb. 3 words appeared: Bellwether Relief Ward. Underneath was a date, November 1972. I felt the cold climb through my boots. At Patty's table, Lorraine had told me not to throw away any papers. The old man had asked whether I planned to tear the station down. Gideon Rowe had offered me $100,000 without setting foot inside. And somebody, more than half a century earlier, had scratched a warning into an iron hatch beneath the floor. "If they say 7, they lied." I looked at Rook. He looked at the sealed doorway. Then he did something I had seen him do only twice before. He sat, he raised his nose, and he gave the short, controlled bark he had once been trained to give when he located human remains. The sound echoed through the empty station. 1 bark. Then silence. I stared at the bricks. There are moments when a sensible man turns around. He tells himself history is history. He takes the money. He fixes his truck. He calls his daughter. He lets dead people stay dead. I had spent years convincing myself I was finally ready to become a sensible man. Then Rook placed 1 paw against the bottom brick. A thin line of black dust fell from the mortar, and from somewhere behind that wall came a smell older than both of us. I reached for the pry bar. That was the moment I stopped owning Cinder Gap Station and started uncovering what it had been built to hide. The first brick came loose easier than it should have. That bothered me. Old mortar usually fights you. It crumbles, flakes, gives up in pieces. This brick shifted almost cleanly when I put the pry bar under it. Someone had repaired the wall, not recently, but long after 1972. Rook smelled the opening before I could even pull the brick free. His nose went to the gap. Then he backed away. I put the brick on the floor. Cold air breathed through the hole, not outside air, underground air. Damp stone, rust, old timber, something sour beneath it. I widened the opening until I could fit my flashlight through. The beam disappeared into darkness. I expected a closet, maybe a storage room. Instead, the light caught another brick wall nearly 10 feet away. Between the two walls was a narrow corridor. Rook whined. Once, quietly. "You don't like it." His ears shifted forward. Neither did I. I removed enough bricks to crawl through. The smarter thing would have been to stop. Call the county. Call a structural engineer. Call someone who owned a hard hat that had not been sitting behind a truck seat for 6 years. Instead, I put on my old work gloves and clipped a leash to Rook's collar. Some habits survive retirement, so do some bad decisions. I entered first. The temperature dropped immediately. The corridor floor sloped downward. Old electrical conduit ran along one wall. Ceramic insulators held wires so ancient the cloth covering had turned brown. There were stains on the brick, oil, smoke. Rook moved slowly behind me. Every few feet he stopped to smell the floor. We reached a steel door. It stood open. On the wall beside it, barely visible beneath soot, someone had painted a red cross. The room beyond stopped me cold. There were beds, not hospital beds exactly, army cots, at least 12 of them, some collapsed, some stacked against the wall. One still stood open beneath a blanket that had rotted almost to threadwoods. Glass medicine bottles covered a shelf. A wooden cabinet stood open. Inside were rolls of yellowed gauze, rusted scissors, empty containers, and what looked like an old oxygen mask. I stepped closer. A newspaper lay beneath a broken chair. The paper fell apart when I touched it, but the date remained readable. November 21st, 1972. I knew enough about abandoned mines to understand what I was seeing. Emergency treatment station, maybe triage, maybe worse. Rook moved toward the back wall. I followed. Names had been written there. Dozens of them, some in chalk, some pencil, some carved directly into the brick. I aimed my flashlight higher. Earl Denson, Calvin Price, Mac Hollis, Jerome Bell, Walter Sweeney. Names and numbers. Some had a check beside them, others an X. One name had been circled 3 times. Samuel Mercer. Beside it someone had written alive. I remembered the elderly man at the diner. Brown jacket, swollen hands. Lorraine calling him nothing, yet looking at him when I mentioned the depot. Mercer, my stomach tightened. Rook smelled the base of the wall. Then he moved to a cot. He sniffed underneath. His body stiffened. I crouched. There was nothing under the cot except dust. Then I noticed a leather strap hanging beneath the canvas. A tag was attached to it. I lifted it carefully. The ink had faded, but the handwriting remained. Minor 14. No name. Severe burns. Transferred where. I searched the room. No answer. At the opposite end was another doorway. This one led to a staircase going down. I stared into it. Rook did not move. He stood behind me. That was unusual. Come, he stayed where he was. I looked back. Rook. His eyes were fixed on the stairs. Then he lowered himself to the floor. Flat refusal. Rook had refused commands before, usually when the command was stupid. That bad, his tail did not move. I shined the light down the stairwell. The steps vanished into blackness after about 15 feet. Old mine timbers lined the sides. One had cracked. Water dripped somewhere below. I listened. Nothing. Then faintly I heard metal moving, not footsteps, a chain, maybe swinging in air, maybe disturbed by water, maybe something else. I decided Rook had the right idea. We backed out. The moment we returned to the baggage room, my phone rang. There was almost no signal inside the station, but one bar appeared. Unknown number, I answered. Callahan. Silence, then a man's voice. You opened it, not a question. My grip tightened around the phone. Who is this? You were warned. Gideon? The line went dead. Rook watched me. I checked outside. No vehicles, no movement, just winter woods and abandoned rails. I called the number. Back. Disconnected. That was when I stopped thinking about the station as an old mystery. Someone was watching. Someone knew when that wall opened. And whoever it was had been ready. I walked the property. 2 sets of tire tracks besides mine. One belonged to Gideon's sport utility vehicle. The other came in from a dirt access road behind the warehouse. Those tracks were narrower. Pickup truck. Recent. They stopped near the back wall of the depot. From there, footprints crossed frozen ground toward an old utility pole. I followed them. The pole had not carried electrical service in years, but something new had been attached behind it. A trail camera, black plastic, small antenna, pointed directly at the baggage room windows. I took it down. Rook smelled it. Then he looked toward the trees. Somebody was here. His nose stayed high. The camera had a cellular transmitter. That explained the phone call. Whoever placed it received an alert. I opened the battery compartment. No identifying marks. No memory card. It had been transmitting remotely. I should have been frightened. Instead, I felt something I had not felt in months. Anger, real anger. Not the useless kind I carried against myself. The clean kind, the useful kind. Someone had watched me enter my own building. Someone had warned me away from a sealed emergency ward, and someone expected me to obey. I carried the camera inside and smashed it against the concrete loading platform. That part was childish. It also felt excellent. Then I drove back to Patty's table. Rook sat beside me. I kept the business card with Gideon's handwritten offer on the dashboard. $100,000. Every time sunlight struck it, the number seemed brighter. I tried not to think about what that money would mean. I thought about it constantly. Lorraine saw me enter the diner and knew something had happened. She did not ask. She simply poured coffee. The old man in the brown jacket sat in the same booth. Samuel Mercer. I walked to him. Your name Samuel? His spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. Lorraine froze behind the counter. The old man lowered his spoon. Who told you? The wall. For several seconds nobody moved. Then Samuel said, sit down. I sat. Rook settled beside me. Samuel looked at the dog. He found it? Yes, of course he did. Lorraine turned the sign on the front door from open to closed. There were 3 customers inside. She told them the kitchen equipment had failed. They complained. She gave everyone free pie. 2 minutes later, it was just us. Lorraine sat beside Samuel. She looked older than she had that morning. What did you see? She asked. Cots, medical supplies, names on a wall. Samuel's eyes dropped. Stairs? Yes. He closed his eyes. Did you go down? No. Good. Why? He opened them again. Because that ain't a basement. I waited. Samuel rubbed his hands. The joints were enlarged from age and work. When I was 21, I worked Bellwether No. 4 mine. His voice was low. Best paying work a young man could get around here if he didn't mind dying before his father. Lorraine touched his arm. Samuel continued. The company that owned it then was Hawthorne Coal and Iron. There it was, Hawthorne. Same family name. Different corporate ending. On November 18, 1972, the night shift went underground at 7. How many? He stared at me. 43. The number sat between us. What happened? Explosion. Methane? That's what they said. What do you say? Samuel leaned forward. Electrical fire in a sealed section that wasn't supposed to be active. Why were miners there? Because Hawthorne was cutting coal where inspectors told them not to cut it. Lorraine added, the roof had been shifting for weeks. Samuel nodded. Foreman said anybody too scared could pick up his final pay. I knew that kind of threat. Different uniform. Same fear. What happened after the explosion? Samuel stared toward the window. Chaos. He swallowed. Ventilation failed. Smoke traveled through the west entries. Men got separated. How did you get out? I didn't. He looked at me. I got dragged to Cinder Gap. I glanced toward Lorraine. Samuel said the mine had a rail tunnel connected to the depot, company's private spur. They used it to move injured men without taking them through town. Why? Control. Lorraine's voice was bitter. Control the scene. Control witnesses. Control numbers. Samuel nodded. Government rescue teams came from the main portal. Hawthorne told them there were 36 men underground. But there were 43, yes, 7 missing from the count. The message on the hatch came back to me. If they say 7, they lied. What did the official report say? Samuel answered immediately. 7 dead. I looked at him. He gave a humorless smile. Now you understand. If 7 did not die, how many? His eyes filled with something I recognized. Survivor's guilt has no language barrier. 22. The diner seemed to tilt. 22 men died at least, and they reported 7 bodies they could not hide. I leaned back. What happened to the other 15? Samuel looked down at his hands. That question has kept this town quiet for 54 years. Lorraine got up. She walked into the kitchen. When she returned, she carried a small metal box. She placed it on the table. The box had once held recipes or index cards. She opened it. Inside were photographs, newspaper clippings, letters. She handed me one photograph, black and white. A group of miners stood outside a portal, 40 or 50 men, coal-black faces, lunch buckets, hard hats. I found Samuel because he pointed to himself. Young, thin, smiling beside him stood a heavier man with one hand on Samuel's shoulder. My brother Daniel, Samuel said. I looked at the wall of faces. Did he survive? No. One of the official 7. Samuel's mouth tightened. No, I understood. Daniel Mercer was one of the missing 15. No body, no official death, no company admission. What did they tell your family? That Daniel had walked off the job the night before. I stared at him. They said he was never underground. Yes. Did anyone believe it? My mother didn't. Samuel's voice cracked. She waited 13 years for him to come through the kitchen door. Lorraine stared at the coffee in front of her. Daniel had 2 boys, she said. Company refused survivor benefits because officially he wasn't working. Samuel nodded. Same with others. How could they erase 15 employees? Samuel smiled without humor. You ever lived in a company town, Mr. Callahan? No. When the company owns the mine, half the houses, the banknote on the grocery store, and 3 men on the county commission, truth becomes expensive. I had heard versions of that before. Different countries, different wars, same mathematics. Who knew? Enough people. Then why did nobody talk? Samuel's face hardened. People did. What happened? My father lost his job. Lorraine said. Her uncle's house burned, Samuel continued. 1 rescue worker disappeared driving home. Police investigate. Truck went into a river. Accident? Samuel stared at me. You tell me. I looked at the photographs. What was the relief ward? Temporary medical station, Samuel said. Company doctor ran it. Why underground? Wasn't underground when they built it. Depot sits against the hill. Back rooms connected to the mine spur. Who was treated there? Men they didn't want outsiders seeing. I thought about the tag. Miner 14, no name, severe burns, transferred. Transferred where? Samuel went pale. You saw that on a tag. He pushed his coffee away. Lorraine whispered, Jesus, tell me. Samuel looked at her. She shook her head. He ignored her. There was an old ventilation tunnel beneath the station. Stairs.
Yes.
Where does it go? Into Bellwether number 4. Still, if it hasn't collapsed, why were miners moved there? Samuel's gaze left mine. I knew the answer before he said it. They weren't moved there. My jaw tightened. You think bodies are down there? I know some went down. How? Because I saw them. Silence. Samuel's hand started trembling. He gripped it with the other. I woke in that ward, burned my arm, broke 2 ribs. Couldn't hear much. His eyes seemed to look through me. Men were screaming. Doctor gave us morphine. He paused. I watched workers carry bodies through the lower door. Dead? Some? Samuel looked at me. One was moving. Lorraine covered her mouth. He was alive? Samuel nodded. I saw his hand. His voice dropped. Fingers scratched the side of the stretcher. I felt cold despite the heat inside the diner. Why would they take living men underground? They were dying. Company had already reported its casualty numbers. That makes no sense. It does if revealing more men proved there was an illegal crew working in the sealed section. There it was, not simply negligence, evidence. Men who could testify, men whose injuries told where the explosion occurred. Do you know who ordered it? Samuel looked at the Hawthorne business card on the table. My father always believed Amos Hawthorne. Who was he? Company president, related to Gideon? Grandfather. I stared at the card. History had just acquired a face. Why didn't you testify? Samuel's eyes flashed. I was 21 years old. My brother was missing. My father had 4 children at home. Hawthorne sent a lawyer to my hospital bed. What did he say? He said my memory was confused from smoke inhalation. Samuel leaned forward. Then he told me if I kept being confused, my father would never work in another mine in the state. And that was enough? His expression became angry. Not at me, at himself. No. I regretted the question immediately. Samuel reached into his jacket. He removed a folded paper so worn the creases looked ready to split. He opened it carefully. A photocopy. Typed document. Settlement and confidentiality agreement. Amount paid, $5,000. Samuel tapped the signature. His own, I signed. I said nothing. My father's mortgage disappeared a week later. Samuel, I signed. He looked directly at me, and every year since, when somebody asks why nobody talked, I remember exactly how much my silence cost. $5,000. 54 years of guilt. I knew men who carried heavier things for less. You're talking now, because I'm almost 75. His voice was suddenly tired. Everybody I was scared of is dead. Not everybody. I placed Gideon's card between us. Samuel read the handwritten offer. His eyes widened. He offered you this? Before he knew what I'd found. Lorraine shook her head. No, he knew. Probably. Samuel pushed the card away. You should take it. That surprised me. Lorraine stared at him. Sam, I'm serious. He looked at me. You don't owe us anything. What about your brother? Daniel is dead whether you find him or not. What about his children? They're old men now. What about the others? His voice rose. What about you? The question caught me. Samuel pointed toward the window. You think Hawthorne stopped being powerful because they stopped digging coal? Gideon's company owns timber, gas leases, construction, trucking. You don't know who you're touching. I know who's watching my property. Then sell it. I looked at the offer again. $100,000. Samuel said, take their money. Get out. I thought of Emily, my grandson. A warm apartment, a decent truck, a life with doors that locked. Rook rested his head against my boot. I almost hated him for it. Not because he was asking me to stay. Rook never asked things like that. He was simply reminding me where I was. I folded the card. I need to know what's downstairs. Samuel's shoulders fell. Lorraine muttered something that sounded like a prayer. Then don't go alone, Samuel said. I won't. He looked at Rook. I meant a person. So did I. For the first time, Samuel almost smiled. Then the diner's telephone rang. Lorraine answered. Patty's table. Her face changed. She said nothing. Then she looked at me. Who is it? I asked. She slowly handed me the receiver. I put it to my ear. Gideon Rowe's voice said, Mr. Callahan, you are making this considerably more complicated than necessary. I looked toward the windows. Where are you? Not important. You watching the diner too? A pause. No. I believed him. That meant someone had called him. Someone nearby. The offer has changed, Gideon said. Let me guess. 200,000. 300. Samuel heard. His face went white. That depot isn't worth 300,000. The depot is worth almost nothing. Then tell me what is. Silence. Then Gideon said, peace. I felt something old wake up inside me. Not the soldier. Not exactly. The part of me trained to listen to what frightened men refused to say. You aren't buying land, I said. No, you're buying the lower level. He said nothing. What's down there, Gideon? Things that no longer matter. 300,000 says they matter. History can be misunderstood. Dead men usually aren't complicated. His breathing changed. Small but audible, so he knew. Take the money, he said. Did your grandfather order injured miners put back underground? Samuel closed his eyes. On the telephone, Gideon's voice lost all warmth. You should be very careful repeating accusations like that. Did he? You have no evidence. Then why are you offering me $300,000? The line went quiet. I could hear faint highway noise behind him. Then Gideon said, because my family has spent half a century trying to keep a tragedy from becoming a circus. A tragedy? Yes, 22 dead men is not a public relations problem. Lorraine's eyes widened. Gideon now knew Samuel had talked. I realized my mistake too late. His voice became colder. Who gave you that number? I looked at Samuel. No one. You just invented 22? I'm creative, Mr. Callahan. Mr. Rowe, his patience finally broke. You have no idea what you are stepping into. I've heard that before. Your military service does not make you untouchable. My fingers tightened around the receiver. He knew more than my name. Neither does your grandfather's money. Another pause. Then he said something that changed the entire conversation. How is Emily? I stopped breathing. Samuel looked at me. Lorraine knew immediately something was wrong. I said, what did you say, your daughter? Gideon's voice became calm again. Emily Callahan Mercer, Cincinnati area, elementary school administrator, married, one son. Every sound in the diner disappeared. What do you want? $300,000. A signed transfer. You leave Bellwether tonight. You mention my daughter again. You misunderstand me. No, I understand you perfectly. I am simply demonstrating that privacy is more fragile than you think. I looked at Rook. He was standing now. Dogs hear things in us before voices change. What happens if I say no? I hope nothing. That isn't an answer. It is the only answer I am giving. Then Gideon hung up. I held the receiver another second. Maybe two, then I placed it down. Samuel asked, "What did he say?" I reached for my coat. "Where are you going?" Lorraine asked. "Back to the station." Samuel stood. "No. Gideon knows my daughter's name." Lorraine went still. I continued. "He knows where she lives." Samuel grabbed my arm. "You go back angry. You make mistakes. He was right. I hated him for being right." I closed my eyes. One breath, two, three. Aaron Voss knocking behind concrete. Emily at age 6 sitting on my shoulders at a county fair. Linda crying in our kitchen. Rook lying across my legs. Different memories. Same lesson. Fear makes every problem feel immediate. Training makes you decide which problem actually is. I called Emily. She answered on the 4th ring. "Dad?" I had not spoken to her in 7 weeks. Her voice hurt more than I expected. "Hey, Em?" A pause. "You okay?" There are daughters who hear silence better than fathers do. "I'm fine." "That means you're not. I need you to do something." "What happened?" "Nothing yet." "Dad, listen to me." "Is Noah there?" "He's upstairs." "Mark?" "At work." I looked around the diner. "Lock the doors. Don't answer for anyone you don't know. Call Mark and tell him to come home." "What is happening?" "I may have irritated someone." She laughed once, nervously. "You?" "Impossible." Despite everything, I smiled. Then she heard what was in my voice. "Dad, are we in danger?" "I don't know." "Then why are you telling me to lock the doors?" "Because not knowing is enough." She went quiet. "Should I call the police?" "Yes. Tell them you've received an indirect threat through me. Ask for a patrol drive-by." "What kind of threat?" "I'll explain." "When?" That word hit hard. "When?" Not if. My daughter was asking when I would finally explain something. "Maybe more than this one thing. Soon." "You always say that." I looked at Rook. He looked back. "You're right." Silence. Then I said, "Tonight. I'll call you tonight and explain everything." "Everything?" "As much as I can." She breathed out. "Okay, Em, yeah, I love you." Another silence. Softer this time. "I love you too, Dad." After the call, I sat down again. My hands were steady. My thoughts were not. Samuel said, "You still want to go back?" "More than before." "You think finding what's underneath will protect your daughter?" "No." I looked at Gideon's card. "But if somebody is willing to threaten my family over what's down there, then the safest thing might be making sure it can't be buried again." Lorraine understood first. "Copies, yes, photographs, everything." Samuel slowly nodded. "Make it too public to erase." "Exactly." He looked toward the dark mountains outside. Then he did something I did not expect. He stood. "I'm coming." "No. You need someone who knows the tunnels. You just told me not to go. I've spent 54 years not going." His voice trembled. "Maybe that's enough." Lorraine grabbed his sleeve. "Sam." He looked at her. "Daniel has been waiting longer than I have left." No one spoke after that. 20 minutes later, Samuel climbed into the passenger seat of my truck. Rook rode behind us. Lorraine gave us flashlights, spare batteries, bottled water, a first aid kit, and enough sandwiches to feed a rescue team. Before I left, she took my hand. "If you find them," her voice broke, "don't leave them in the dark." I promised I wouldn't. We reached Cinder Gap shortly before sunset. Something was wrong before I even stopped the truck. The front door stood open. I had locked it. Rook erupted. Not barking wildly. One hard warning bark, then another. I grabbed him before he jumped out. "Hold!" Samuel whispered, "Someone's here." Maybe. The station looked empty. I shut off the engine, listened, nothing. I took a flashlight and the steel tire iron from behind my seat. Samuel looked at it, thought Navy SEALs carried better weapons. I retired. We approached the building from the side. Rook tracked along the ground. Fresh boot prints. 2 people, maybe 3. They entered through the front, exited through the freight side. Inside, drawers had been opened. My duffel bag dumped. The old filing cabinet upstairs had been forced open. Someone had searched everything. They were not thieves. My wallet, hidden beneath the cot, was untouched. The $500 in emergency cash was still there. They wanted records. We reached the baggage room. The bricks I had removed were scattered. The iron hatch was open. I had not opened it. Samuel stopped breathing. The lifting ring stood upright. Blackness waited below. Then I saw the spray-painted message on the wall, fresh white paint. Large letters, "Last warning." Rook moved toward the opening. He smelled it. Then he pulled back sharply. His hair rose from shoulders to tail. I crouched beside him. "What?" Samuel aimed his flashlight through the hatch. The beam reached an iron ladder. At the bottom, perhaps 12 feet down, something reflected the light. Metal. I leaned closer, a gasoline can, open. Beside it lay several soaked rags. The smell reached me then. Fuel. I understood instantly. They were going to burn it. Samuel whispered, "Whole station." No, I aimed the flashlight down. They wanted the underground rooms to burn first. Destroy paper, destroy timber, collapse tunnels, erase evidence. But whoever had started preparing the fire had left suddenly. Why? Rook turned. His ears snapped toward the brick doorway, the corridor, the relief ward. Then we heard it. A sound from below. Not dripping water, not chain, a human cough. Samuel's face drained of color. Another cough, weak, painful, then a voice, "Help!" Rook launched toward the corridor. I released the leash. Find. He disappeared through the opening. Samuel and I followed. Through the ward, toward the stairs. Rook barked below once, twice, then again. I reached the staircase. My flashlight cut into darkness. Halfway down, a man lay twisted against the wall. Work boots, blue jeans, heavy jacket, blood along the side of his head. Rook stood above him, barking. I moved down. The timber creaked beneath my weight. The man was alive. Barely. I recognized him, the elderly miner from the photograph. No, younger. Maybe 60. I had seen him once that morning. He had been sitting 2 booths behind me at Patty's table. The other man. The one who had looked away when I mentioned Cinder Gap. His eyelids fluttered. "Can you hear me?" He opened one eye. "Don't. What happened?" He tried to move. I checked his head. Bad cut. Possible concussion. "What is your name?" "Ray." "Ray what?" "Delaney." Samuel came down 2 steps. "Ray?" The injured man's eye focused. Samuel gripped the railing. "You fool. What are you doing here?" Ray coughed. Tried. His breathing hitched. Tried to stop them. "Who?" Ray's hand found my sleeve. His grip was weak, but desperate. "They found the ledger." Every muscle in my body tightened. "What ledger?" He swallowed. "Names." "Whose names?" Ray looked toward the darkness beneath us, then back at me. "All of them." A noise echoed somewhere far below. A door slamming. Rook spun. His growl rolled through the stairwell. Someone else was still down there. I shut off my flashlight. Samuel did the same. Darkness became absolute. Then I saw a beam move across the tunnel below. Once gone, then again footsteps running away from us. Rook surged against the leash. I whispered, "Stay." Ray gripped my sleeve harder. "Don't chase him." I leaned closer. "Why?" His eye widened. "Because the ledger isn't what they're scared of." Below us, the running stopped. Then came a deep mechanical groan. Samuel whispered, "Oh God, what?" He stared into the darkness. "That's the old floodgate." A second groan rolled through the tunnel. Then we heard water. At first distant, then louder. Moving fast. Samuel turned toward me. "They're flooding the lower tunnel." Rook barked. Ray started trying to stand. I grabbed him. "Easy." He shook his head violently. No time. The sound became a roar. Water struck metal somewhere beneath us. Samuel pointed upward. "Move." I pulled Ray over my shoulder. Pain exploded through my bad shoulder. I nearly dropped him. Rook ran ahead. Samuel climbed behind me. The stairs shook. Water slammed into the bottom landing. I climbed. 1 step, another. My shoulder screamed. Ray's weight pulled me backward. Then the sound of rushing water filled the stairwell. I stopped hearing anything else, and suddenly I was not beneath Cinder Gap Station. I was behind that wall again. Aaron was knocking. 3 times. Pause. 3 times. I had men behind me. A collapse ahead. A decision. Leave 1, save 4. My legs stopped, not because they were tired, because 54 years of someone else's buried dead had somehow opened the one grave I had spent 12 years trying to close. Then Rook appeared above me. He ran back down 3 steps, bit the sleeve of my coat, and pulled hard. My mind snapped into place. Not Afghanistan, not Aaron. Ray, Samuel, Rook now. Move. I climbed. The water hit my boots, cold, violent. I reached the top. Samuel grabbed Ray's jacket and helped drag him into the relief ward. Water exploded up the stairwell behind us. Rook cleared the doorway. I slammed the old steel door. The force of the water hit it seconds later. The whole wall shook. Samuel fell. I dropped beside Ray. Everyone was breathing, for the moment. Then the lights from our flashlights caught something floating in the water seeping beneath the door, a piece of paper, old, yellow, protected inside a transparent plastic sleeve. It drifted across the floor and stopped against Rook's paw. He looked down. I picked it up, a typed list, names, dates, payments. Beside every name was a dollar amount. At the top, someone had written 2 words in red pencil. Family settlements. Samuel leaned closer. His flashlight shook. I counted the names, not 7, not 15, 22. And beside the final entry was a name Samuel had spent 54 years waiting to see. Daniel Mercer. Samuel made a sound I will never forget. Not a cry. Not quite. It was the sound of an old man finding proof that his dead brother had never abandoned him. His knees gave out. I caught him. For half a century, Samuel Mercer had carried shame because a corporation told the world his brother had walked away. Now Daniel's name was in his hands, but there was something else on that page, something worse. Beneath the list of settlements was a handwritten instruction. I held the flashlight closer. Samuel read it with me. Remove survivors before federal inspection, destroy medical records. Transfer unrecovered to Lower East Shaft, and beneath those words was a signature. Not Amos Hawthorne, someone else, someone whose last name made Samuel stop breathing again. Roland Mercer. I looked at him. Mercer? Samuel stared at the signature, my father. The water hammered against the steel door. Rook stood between us and the stairwell. Samuel's face collapsed. For 54 years he had believed Hawthorne had buried his brother. Now he was holding a document, suggesting his own father had helped them do it. For several seconds nobody moved. Water hammered against the steel door behind us. Samuel Mercer stared at his father's name, as if the letters themselves had reached up and struck him. Roland Mercer. His flashlight shook in his hand. I had seen men receive bad news in deserts, ships, hospitals, and kitchens. There are different kinds of shock. Some people shout, some deny, some become very still. Samuel became still. No, he said, not loudly, just one word. No, I held the plastic-covered page closer to the light. The signature looked real, old fountain pen, dark ink faded brown. The handwriting beneath it was steady, too steady. Samuel took the page from me. His fingers trembled. That's his name. I can see that. No, he looked up. That's his hand. That changed things. You recognize the writing? I watched him sign my school forms, mortgage papers, Christmas cards. Every paycheck he cashed, his breathing became shallow. That's my father's handwriting. Rook stood near the door. His ears moved with every impact of water. Ray Delaney lay on the floor beside us, barely conscious. He opened one eye. Samuel. Samuel turned toward him. You knew? Ray said nothing. Samuel took one step forward. Did you know? Ray winced. I knew there was something. Something? Samuel's voice cracked. My father signed this. Ray tried to sit up. I put a hand on his shoulder. Don't. He ignored me. You think I came down here for fun? Samuel leaned closer. You knew my father was involved? I knew his name was in the archive, and you never told me? I didn't know why. 54 years, Ray. You don't. Samuel's face twisted. You don't know what my mother did every Sunday. Ray closed his eyes, and Samuel continued. She set Daniel's place at dinner. Lorraine had not told me that. Samuel had not either. He stared at the paper. Every Sunday for 13 years, his voice became quieter. She said if he came home hungry and his chair wasn't there, she'd never forgive herself. Ray turned his face away. Samuel whispered, My father sat at that table. Something in his expression broke. He sat there and watched her wait. I understood why this hurt differently. It was one thing to discover that powerful strangers had lied. It was another to believe your own father had sat across from your mother and helped preserve the lie. I took the page back. Samuel. He did not answer. Look at me. Eventually he did. One document is not the whole story. You think somebody forged his name? I think we don't know enough yet. I know his handwriting. That's not what I asked. Samuel stared at me. People sign things under pressure. My father wasn't weak. I didn't say he was. Then why would he sign this? I don't know. That was the truth. I could have invented hope. I could have told him there had to be an explanation. There did not have to be. Sometimes fathers fail. Sometimes good men become frightened. Sometimes a signature is exactly what it looks like. But I had learned long ago that the fastest explanation is often the one someone wants you to accept. The water gave us another reason to move. The steel door bowed inward with a low groan. Ray heard it. Won't hold. How long? He looked at the base. Minutes, maybe less. I glanced around the relief ward. The way back to the baggage room was clear, but if water kept rising through the lower tunnel, we had no idea how high it would go. Samuel finally folded the document and slipped it beneath his coat. Let's get out. Ray grabbed my sleeve. No, I looked down. He was pale. Blood had soaked through the cloth near his temple. Know what? The ledger. We have one page. Not enough. Right now, one page beats drowning. He shook his head. Full ledger is deeper. Samuel stared at him. You found it, Ray swallowed, years ago. That sentence stopped all three of us. How many years, I asked. 31. Samuel's face changed. You've known about this for 31 years? Ray looked at him. I knew there were records. Same thing. No. Ray's voice strengthened. No, Sam, not the same thing. The steel door shuddered. Rook barked once. I made the talk upstairs. Ray shook his head. If we leave, they'll come back. They already tried to flood the tunnel. Exactly. His eye fixed on me. They think the lower archive is still sealed. Archive? Company records where? He looked toward the flooded stairwell. Other side. I laughed once, not because anything was funny. Of course, Samuel said, we cannot go through that. Ray pointed weakly toward the back wall. Service passage. I turned. What service passage? He indicated the row of medicine cabinets. Behind shelves, I moved them. The first cabinet was bolted. The second came away from the wall with a squeal of metal. Behind it was another narrow door. No handle, just a recessed latch. You knew this was here? I asked. Ray nodded. Used it coming in. Then why were you on the flooded stairs? Tried to stop the men at the gate. Who were they? 2. Names? Didn't see faces. Company? Probably. Probably is not useful. Ray managed a bitter smile. Welcome to Bellwether. The steel door bent again. I opened the service passage. A tunnel no wider than my shoulders disappeared into darkness. Dry, for now. Rook sniffed it. He entered without hesitation. That was enough for me. We moved. I took Ray's weight on my good side. Samuel followed. The passage ran through the hill at a slight incline. Brick gave way to rough stone, then timber. The air changed. Cooler, older. Every few feet I saw black residue on the walls. Coal dust. We were entering the old mine system. Rook stayed ahead. His nails clicked softly over stone. The sound brought back places I did not want. Underground operations, concrete corridors, collapsed tunnels. Darkness where radios stopped working. I concentrated on Rook, one step at a time, one breath at a time. The passage narrowed. Ray whispered, left ahead. We reached a junction. One tunnel descended, the other continued level. Rook smelled both, then looked at me. Which way? I asked Ray. Level, we continued. After maybe 200 feet, we reached an iron door. Ray searched his pocket. Empty. He cursed. Key! Where? Lost it when they hit me. I looked at the door. Old lock, heavy, but the surrounding frame had rusted. I handed Samuel the flashlight. You still know how to use a pry bar? He looked at me. I worked underground before you learned to shave. That wasn't the question. For the first time since seeing his father's signature, something almost alive returned to his face. Give me the damn bar. We worked together. The frame resisted, then cracked. The door opened 6 inches. Rook pushed his nose through. Sniffed, no reaction. I widened it. The room beyond was dry. Shelves lined the walls, steel cabinets, wooden crates. Document boxes, dozens, maybe hundreds. Some collapsed, some labeled payroll, injury, inspection, private. Samuel stood in the doorway. My God. Ray said, Hawthorne Archive. I aimed my light across the room. Why hide company records in a mine? Ray answered. Same reason you bury anything. I turned to him. You said you found this 31 years ago. Part of it. Explain. He leaned against a cabinet. His face had gone gray. We need to stop his bleeding, I said. Samuel opened the first aid kit. Ray protested. I ignored him. We cleaned the wound. Deep but not skull deep. Probably needed stitches. Maybe imaging. We did what we could. Then Ray started talking. Their crew had been surveying old mine entries for subsidence risks. One day, a sinkhole opened near the depot. Ray and another worker discovered part of the service tunnel. We found 2 boxes, he said. What was in them? Payroll records, medical invoices, some correspondence. Did you tell anyone? My supervisor. And he called the property owner. Took everything. Did you make copies? No. Samuel shook his head. Then why are we standing here? Ray looked at him. Because I came back. When? 3 nights later. Samuel froze. In the payroll? Yeah. Working the night of the explosion? Yeah. Samuel's eyes closed. Ray continued. I knew what that meant. Did you tell me? Samuel laughed once. It was ugly. Everybody was scared. Ray nodded. I know. You knew my brother wasn't a runaway. Yes. And kept your mouth shut. Yes. Samuel looked ready to hit him. He did not. That restraint told me more about him than any punch could have. Ray said, I came back because I wanted proof. Found this room. You took records, one ledger, the one you're looking for now? No. Smaller one. Payments. To families, to people who kept quiet. Samuel stared. Names, county officials. Doctor, sheriff, newspaper editor. Bribes, some. Some? Ray looked at him. Others were compensation. For what? For men who knew too much. I said, what happened to the ledger? Ray looked at the floor. My wife burned it. No one spoke, he continued. She found it in our house. Asked what it was. I told her. Why burn it? Because we had 2 kids. Simple, human, terrible. Ray stared into the darkness. 3 days earlier, somebody followed her home. Samuel's anger faded slightly. Ray said, a week after she burned it, the following stopped. Coincidence? No. You sure? Ray looked at me. You know when you're being watched. I did. What changed now? Hawthorne started buying land around the old mine 2 years ago. For what? Carbon storage. I understood enough to know what he meant. Old underground formations can become valuable again long after coal disappears. What does that have to do with the archive? Before they inject anything, engineers inspect old shafts, seal voids, stabilize tunnels, and they might find the bodies or destroy them. Samuel whispered, Jesus. Ray nodded. I started coming back. Why? Because I'm 71. He looked at Samuel, and because being afraid got old. That line sat with us. I knew exactly what he meant. Fear exhausts itself eventually, not because danger disappears, because a man gets tired of arranging his life around it. Did Gideon know you were searching? I think so. How? I met with him. Samuel snapped his head toward Ray. You what? Last month. Why? I wanted to know whether Hawthorne would admit what happened. And? Ray smiled bitterly. How much? Enough. Meaning $500,000. Samuel stared at him. You turned down $500,000? Ray looked at the floor. Not immediately. That answer was more believable than a heroic one. What happened? I asked. I thought about it for 3 days, and my grandson asked me what coal mining was. Ray swallowed, so I showed him old photographs. He looked toward Samuel. Daniel was in one. My brother. Yeah, my grandson asked who he was. Ray's voice became rough. I told him Daniel Mercer. Then he asked what happened to him. Ray stared at his own hands. I heard myself say I didn't know. Samuel said nothing. Ray continued, and I realized I'd been lying so long the lie came out automatically. He looked at me. That's when I decided I wanted the ledger. What ledger? The final relief ledger. He pointed toward a locked steel cabinet. That one. The cabinet was marked private medical. Samuel stared. You've opened it before? No. Then how do you know? Ray pulled a folded sheet from his boot. It had survived the attack. He pointed to a handwritten note. Final relief register. I moved to the cabinet. The lock was stronger than the old door. Samuel said, we need tools. I've got one. I raised the pry bar. He shook his head. That is not a tool anymore. That thing's become your religion. I almost smiled. It took us several minutes. Eventually the lock tore loose. The door opened. Inside were 6 ledgers wrapped in waxed cloth. I took the top one, 1970, 1971, then the third, 1972. Samuel stopped breathing. I placed it on a crate, opened the cover. Patient numbers, names, times, injuries, treatment, status. The pages from November 18th were marked in red. Samuel stood beside me. We read, one minor after another: burns, smoke inhalation, crush, injury, fracture, deceased, transferred. Then Daniel Mercer, patient 17, admitted after midnight, smoke inhalation, broken wrist, conscious. Samuel touched the page. Conscious. His finger rested beside the word. He was alive. I continued reading. Treatment administered. Oxygen, fluids, morphine. Then status, transferred to lower east shaft. No time, no destination, no physician's signature, Samuel whispered. They took him down there alive. We kept reading. Not one. 9 men marked alive or conscious before transfer. 9. The room became smaller, worse. The tragedy we had imagined changed shape again. They had not simply hidden dead miners. They had moved living witnesses. Samuel leaned over the ledger. Find my father. Why? Find him. We checked signatures, nurses, attendants, company doctor, transport supervisor. Then there it was. Roland Mercer. His name appeared beside several transfers. Samuel stepped backward. No, this time the word had less force. More pain, Ray whispered. Sam. Don't, I said. Don't. Samuel walked away. His flashlight beam shook over the wall. Then stopped. He had found something. A framed photograph. Dust covered the glass. Samuel wiped it. 4 men stood inside the relief ward. One was Samuel's father. Younger. Hard face, work shirt. Beside him stood Amos Hawthorne. There was no mistaking who held power in the image. Amos wore a suit. Roland looked like a laborer. Between them was a doctor. The fourth man wore a sheriff's uniform. Samuel stared. My father worked maintenance. Ray nodded. He knew the tunnels. Samuel turned. That is why they used him. It was not a question. Maybe, maybe not. I returned to the ledger. Something bothered me. 9 living men transferred, but the document we had found upstairs referred to 15 unrecovered. If 9 were living, what about 6? I flipped forward. A folded envelope fell from the back cover, sealed. On the front, for federal review only. The seal had never been broken. I opened it. Inside was a carbon copy of a typed statement. 3 pages. Signed by Roland Mercer. Samuel came back. What is that? Your father, I read quickly, then again. The story changed. Roland's statement said he had been ordered by the company doctor and Amos Hawthorne to move injured men through the lower tunnel. At first, he believed they were being transferred to ambulances waiting at another portal. But after the 4th stretcher, he realized no ambulances were there. The men were being placed inside an abandoned equipment chamber, a temporary holding area. The stated reason was quarantine and crowd control. Then Roland overheard Amos Hawthorne tell the doctor that federal inspectors could not see the extra crew. According to the statement, Roland refused to move another patient. A supervisor threatened his job. Roland refused again. Then he did something nobody in Bellwether remembered. He went back into the chamber. He tried to release the men. Samuel's hand gripped my arm. Keep reading. I did. Roland wrote that 7 of the men were already dead by the time he returned. 2 remained conscious. One of them was Daniel. Samuel stopped me. My brother? I nodded. His face broke. Read it. I continued. Daniel asked his father to take Samuel out of Bellwether, but Roland refused to leave without trying to save him. He and another worker moved Daniel and one surviving miner toward the service passage. They nearly reached the relief ward. Then company security intercepted them. The other worker was beaten. Daniel was taken back. Roland was held overnight inside a maintenance room. The next morning, he was forced to sign transfer documents. Samuel sank onto a crate. He tried. Yes, my father tried. According to this, yes. He covered his face. For almost a minute, nobody spoke. Then Samuel asked, "Why didn't he tell us?" I continued reading. The final paragraph answered him. Roland wrote that company representatives threatened to accuse Daniel of theft and sabotage. They threatened to prosecute Samuel for false statements related to the mine explosion. They threatened to evict the entire Mercer family from company housing. And they threatened Samuel's younger sisters. That was enough. Not because Roland was weak, because fear works best when it points at someone you love. Samuel looked older than before, but different, not defeated. His grief had changed direction. My father died when I was 40. What did he tell you? Nothing. Samuel looked at me. What? When I got angry about Daniels, he'd say, "Don't believe paper more than blood." Ray looked at him. Samuel almost laughed. I thought he meant family loyalty. I looked at the signed transfer page. Maybe he meant this. Samuel stared at the statement. Why put it here? Maybe he hoped federal investigators would eventually find it, but they never did. Ray said, Hawthorne controlled access. I folded the statement carefully. Then we make sure somebody sees it now. Rook suddenly stood. His head turned toward the doorway. I stopped. Samuel saw me. What? Quiet. We listened at nothing. Then a metallic sound far down the service tunnel. Not water, not settling rock, someone closing a door. Ray whispered, "They came back." Rook growled. I extinguished my flashlight. The others did the same. Darkness swallowed us. Footsteps entered the passage. Slow, careful, not one person, at least 2. I listened. Different cadence, one heavy, one lighter. They were not searching blindly. I touched his neck. "Stay," Samuel whispered. "What do we do?" "Do exactly what I tell you." The old part of me was awake now. Not the angry part, the useful part. I moved Ray behind the steel cabinets. Samuel stayed with him. I positioned myself beside the doorway. Rook crouched near me. No barking, no movement. The footsteps came closer. A flashlight appeared, then disappeared. Someone whispered. Could not hear the words. Another light swept the tunnel. 20 feet, 1510. The first man entered large. Dark jacket, flashlight in one hand, something else in the other. The second man entered, smaller, carrying a plastic fuel container. That told me everything I needed. They intended to burn the archive. I stepped behind the first man, grabbed his wrist, turned. His flashlight dropped. The pry bar hit the floor. Rook exploded toward the second man's arm, not biting flesh, taking the sleeve, dragging him off balance. The fuel container crashed down. Samuel shouted. Ray cursed. The first man drove an elbow backward. Good move. I shifted. He missed. Then he head-butted me. Better move. Pain flashed across my face. I drove him into a cabinet. Metal shook. The second man kicked Rook. Rook released. Then lunged again. The man stumbled backward. His flashlight illuminated his face. I recognized him. Not from the diner, not from town. From Gideon's sport utility vehicle. He had been sitting in the passenger seat when Gideon first arrived. I had only seen his profile. Now I knew. Gideon had not come alone. The first man twisted free. He pulled something from his waistband. A handgun. Everything changed. Down! I shoved Samuel behind the cabinet. The shot went off, deafening underground. The bullet hit steel. My bad shoulder screamed. He was younger, strong, but panic makes people predictable. I drove his wrist against the cabinet once, twice. The gun dropped. Ray kicked it away. Samuel grabbed the fallen pry bar. The second man stopped fighting Rook. He raised both hands. Enough. The first man tried again. Samuel swung. The man collapsed. Samuel stared at the pry bar. Worked in mines, he said, then added, we solve things differently. Even I laughed. Just once. Then Rook barked sharply. The second man was reaching for his pocket. I aimed the fallen handgun at him. Don't. He froze. Hands where I can see them. He obeyed. I moved closer. Who sent you? Silence. Rook growled. The man looked at him. Gideon? Still nothing. I stepped forward. You're standing in a sealed mine with a former search dog, an angry old coal miner, and a man whose patience is currently limited. Samuel said. Very limited. The man swallowed. Gideon didn't send us. That surprised me. Then who did? He looked toward the injured man, his father. Samuel whispered, Gideon's father? The man nodded. Malcolm Rowe. Why? He said the son had lost control of the situation. I thought about Gideon, the offers, the threats. Maybe we had assumed the wrong generation was in charge. What does Malcolm want destroyed? Everything. Why? The man hesitated. Samuel lifted the pry bar. Everything what? Anything from 1972. Why now? Because the federal review starts next month. Ray had been right. The underground storage project. Inspections, new surveys, old shafts opened, old secrets exposed. I asked, where is Malcolm? The man said nothing. Then Rook's ears lifted. A phone vibrated. Not mine. The first man's pocket. I pulled it out. Unknown caller. I answered. No one spoke. Then Gideon Rowe said, Wade? I looked at the men. Gideon, a long pause. Where are they? Who? You know exactly who. Your father's. Silence. Then Gideon whispered something I did not expect. Get out. What? Get Samuel out. Get Ray out. Take the records and leave. You threatened my daughter, I know. That makes trusting you difficult. I was trying to scare you into leaving before my father realized how much you'd found. I looked at the captured men. You're saying you were protecting me? No. Gideon's voice cracked for the first time. I'm saying I was trying to control something I have never actually controlled. Where is your father? On his way to Cinder Gap. Samuel heard. His face hardened. How many men? Gideon answered through the phone as if he heard him. At least 6. I looked toward the service tunnel. Armed? Yes. Police? Do not call local law enforcement. Why? Because my father spent 40 years making sure he never had to fear a local badge. Samuel closed his eyes. Same town, same system, different decade. I said, then who do we call? Gideon took a breath. Federal investigators. Which ones? I sent you a number. My phone vibrated. A message arrived. Why should they believe me? Because I'm sending them documents too. What documents? Another pause. Then Gideon said, the ones proving my grandfather ordered the cover-up. Samuel stared at the phone. I said, you had proof for 12 years and you did nothing? I tried to bury it. At least he admitted it. Why change now? Gideon's answer came quietly. Because my father just ordered 2 men to burn the room I spent my whole life pretending did not exist. I understood. People do not always become brave because they become good. Sometimes they become brave because denial finally becomes more painful than truth. How long until Malcolm arrives? 10 minutes. I looked at Ray. Samuel, old Rook, alert. 6 armed men coming. A mine archive full of evidence. No safe exit we could trust. What is Malcolm planning? Gideon said, he thinks you're still in the station. Good. No. His voice sharpened. Listen to me. He's bringing demolition charges. The room went silent. What kind? Industrial explosive. How much? Enough to collapse the lower tunnels and make it look like subsidence. Samuel whispered, "He'll bury Daniel again." I looked at the ledger, at Roland Mercer's statement, at 54 years of names. No, Gideon said. Wade, no, you cannot stop 6 armed men. Don't need to. What are you going to do? I picked up the ledger, handed Samuel the statement, told Ray to take the payment sheet. Then I looked at the 2 men on the floor. Their jackets, their helmets, their equipment, their radios. Old training does not disappear. It waits. I looked at Rook. He looked at me, and for the first time since I had bought Cinder Gap Station, I knew exactly what came next. We're going to let Malcolm Rowe think he buried the evidence. Samuel stared at me. What? I checked the captured man's radio, then the fuel, then the mine map. Gideon's father wants a collapse. Yes, then we're going to give him one. Ray frowned. Are you insane? Possibly. Samuel looked at the tunnel. What about the records? We moved the originals. Where? I pointed to the map. There was an old air shaft west of the archive. Small, too narrow for men, but maybe not for a dog. Samuel followed my finger. No, I looked at Rook. How wide? Ray understood first. 20 inches. Maybe 22. Rook was large, but narrow enough at the shoulders if the shaft had not shifted. Samuel said, "You cannot send him through that." I won't. I led him to the shaft opening, removed the rusted grate. Cold air moved through. Rook sniffed, then entered halfway. Stopped. Looked back. No fear. I attached a lightweight canvas pouch around his harness. Inside went the most important documents we had found. The final ledger pages, Roland Mercer's statement, the settlement list, enough to prove the story even if the archive disappeared. The shaft supposedly emerged near the creek, 400 feet away. I tied a small locator light to his collar. Samuel crouched beside him. "You take care of those papers, boy." Rook licked Samuel's hand, then looked at me. For one terrible second, I thought about every man I had ever sent into danger. Aaron, the wall, the knocking, the order to leave. My hand rested on Rook's neck. I could not do it. Not again. Then Rook leaned forward, not away from me, toward the shaft. His choice. I unclipped the leash. Find outside. He disappeared into darkness. I watched the small red locator light move away. I did not answer, because hope is not the same thing as certainty. A radio crackled behind us. One of Malcolm's men. Team 1, status? I picked up the radio, changed my voice. Archive clear, static, evidence. I looked at Samuel. Burning. The radio answered. Copy. Mr. Rowe inbound. I handed Samuel another flashlight. Time to move. Where? Back to the relief ward. Ray stared at me. The water should be dropping. Should you want certainty? Pick another story. We left the archive. The 2 captured men stayed zip-tied to a steel support. One cursed me. The other looked relieved, maybe because Malcolm frightened him more than I did. As we reached the service tunnel, I heard a distant engine above ground. Then another. Samuel looked upward. They're here. We moved faster. At the junction, the sound of water had weakened. The steel door to the relief ward still held. I opened it. Water covered the lower stairwell, but had stopped rising. We crossed back toward the baggage room. Then headlights cut through cracks in the brickwork above us. Vehicles, several. Doors closing. Men shouting. Malcolm Rowe had arrived, and Rook was still somewhere inside 400 feet of black mine shaft. I looked toward the wall as if I could see him through stone. Come on, buddy. My phone vibrated. A location alert. Rook's tracker. For 1 second, no signal. Then it appeared. Only for a moment. Samuel smiled. He did it? Yeah. The old man's shoulders dropped. Good dog. Footsteps moved across the station floor above. Malcolm's voice carried through the hatch. Older, deep, angry. Find Callahan. Another man said, "What about the dog?" Malcolm answered, "Shoot it if you see it." Every calm thought in my head disappeared. Samuel saw my face. Wade. I looked at him. He shook his head. Don't become stupid now. That was probably the best advice anyone had given me all year. I raised the radio. The plan had been simple. Make Malcolm believe the archive was burning. Lead his men into the lower level. Slip out another way. Let federal investigators intercept them. But simple plans rarely survive contact with men willing to shoot dogs. Then I heard Rook bark outside. One sharp bark. Above us, someone shouted, "There!" A gunshot cracked through the station. Then another. My body moved before thought. I ran for the stairs. Samuel grabbed my coat. "Wade!" Another shot. Then silence. I tore free, climbed, reached the baggage room. The outer door stood open. Night had fallen. Headlights lit the old platform. Men moved between vehicles, and near the creek Rook ran through the dark. Alive, fast. A bullet struck brick behind him. I raised the stolen handgun. Then stopped. Not because I was afraid, because Rook suddenly changed direction. He was not running away. He was leading someone, directly toward the old loading platform, directly toward the place where the ground had been hollowed by 54 years of forgotten tunnels. The gunman chased him. 1 step, 2, 3. The frozen earth beneath the man cracked, then vanished. He dropped through with a scream. Rook stopped at the edge, turned and barked. Once, Samuel reached me. He stared. Did that dog just ambush a man with geology, search and rescue? Samuel shook his head. That's not rescue. No. I almost smiled. He's adapting. Then a new vehicle arrived, long black sedan. An elderly man stepped out, tall, white hair, camel-colored coat. No hurry, no fear. He looked at the broken depot as if he still owned the valley around it. Malcolm Rowe. Behind him, Gideon climbed from another vehicle. He looked nothing like the controlled man who had offered me money that morning. His tie was gone, coat open, face pale. Malcolm looked at him. You shouldn't have come, Gideon answered. Neither should you. The older man smiled, then turned toward the depot. His eyes found me immediately. Wade Callahan. I raised the handgun. His men raised theirs. Samuel whispered, "This is bad." Malcolm looked toward the creek. Rook stood in darkness. Then he looked back at me. "You should have taken my son's offer," I said. "Your son should have chosen a better father." Gideon closed his eyes. Malcolm's smile disappeared. "Give it to me." "Why? It's already gone." His expression changed. Where? I looked toward the creek. Rook barked once. Malcolm followed the sound. He understood. Kill the dog. Gideon stepped in front of his father. No. Malcolm stared at him. Gideon did not move. Something old passed between them. Not business, not money. A son finally standing where a frightened boy should have stood decades earlier. Malcolm said, "Move." "No. You have no idea what you're protecting." "I know exactly what. You are destroying this family." Gideon looked at him. "No." His voice was quiet. "Grandfather started that." Malcolm's men looked toward the road. Gitchen smiled without humor. "Federal agents." Malcolm's face finally changed. Real fear. He turned toward the station, toward the open hatch, and I understood what he was thinking. If he could not recover the evidence, he could still collapse everything beneath us. He shouted, "Do it." One of the men near the warehouse grabbed a remote detonator. I fired, not at him, at the device. The bullet hit the man's hand. The detonator fell. He screamed. Another man raised his weapon. Gunfire exploded across the platform. Rook ran toward us. The first federal vehicle appeared at the end of the access road. Then Malcolm Rowe did something none of us expected. He ran inside the station, straight toward the hatch. I followed. By the time I reached the baggage room, he was already descending. Samuel shouted behind me, "Where's he going?" I knew. The archive. There was still something down there he feared more than arrest. I chased him through the relief ward, down the partially flooded stairwell, into the service passage. His flashlight bounced ahead. He was nearly 80, but terror gave him speed. I followed. Rook caught up behind me. Then Samuel. We reached the archive. Malcolm had already entered. He was standing beside the open medical cabinet, searching, throwing ledgers onto the floor. "Stop." He turned. His face was wild, not the calm patriarch anymore. Not the company man, just an old son standing inside his father's crime. "What are you looking for?" He ignored me. "Amos's confession?" He stopped. That was it, I had guessed. Samuel stared. "There is a confession." Malcolm looked at him. "You." His expression sharpened. "Mercer." Samuel stepped forward. "My brother's name was Daniel." Malcolm said nothing. "My father's name was Roland." Still nothing. Samuel held up the signed statement. He tried to save them. Malcolm's face changed. "You don't know what he did." "Then tell me." He failed. Samuel's jaw tightened. "So did your grandfather." Malcolm laughed. "My grandfather built this county. He buried men under it." The radio on Malcolm's coat crackled. "Agents above. Men surrendering." Malcolm looked around. No exit, no power left except information. Then he smiled. "What?" "None of them were." I raised the handgun slightly. "Explain." Malcolm stared at the far wall. "There were 43 men underground that night." "We know." "No." He looked at me. "There were 51. The number landed hard." Samuel whispered, "What are you talking about?" 8 men weren't miners. Who were they? Malcolm looked at the ground. Federal safety inspectors. I felt cold move through me. Inspectors were underground during the explosion. Unofficial inspection. Samuel stared. Why wasn't that in any report? Malcolm smiled. Because 7 of them never came back out. 7. The warning on the hatch. If they say 7, they lied. We had thought it meant 7 miners. It meant something else. 7 inspectors. 7 witnesses with federal authority. 1 survivor. I asked what happened to the 8th. Locked, unopened. And suddenly I understood what he had been searching for. Not Amos Hawthorne's confession, the inspector's report. Malcolm whispered. He lived long enough to write everything down. Rook walked toward the cabinet, sniffed, then sat. Samuel looked at me. The entire story had just opened one more door, and behind that door was no longer only a company crime. It was evidence that someone had erased the deaths of federal investigators. Malcolm Rowe stepped toward the cabinet. I raised the gun. Don't. He looked at me, then smiled. You still think this ends with my family? Sirens echoed above. Rook stared at the locked cabinet. Malcolm's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Open that, Wade, and you'll find out why people far more powerful than Hawthorne wanted Cinder Gap forgotten. The locked cabinet stood in the corner as if it had been waiting for us. Malcolm Rowe stared at it. Samuel stared at Malcolm. Rook sat directly in front of the steel doors, and I stood there with a handgun pointed at an old man whose family had spent more than half a century teaching an entire county how to forget. Above us, federal agents were entering Cinder Gap Station. Their voice bars carried faintly through the tunnels. Malcolm heard them too. He did not seem frightened anymore. That bothered me. Fear had vanished from his face and been replaced by resignation. There are men who panic when they lose control. There are other men who become dangerous because they finally stop pretending they have anything left to protect. Malcolm belonged to the second kind. Open it, he said. I looked at him. A minute ago you were trying to destroy whatever is inside. I changed my mind. Old age making you flexible. His mouth twitched. Open it, Mr. Callahan. Samuel stepped beside me. Why? Malcolm looked at him. Because you deserve to know what your father died trying to tell people. That stopped Samuel. What do you know about my father's death? Malcolm did not answer. Samuel moved toward him. I put out an arm. Sam. No. His voice was shaking. This man knows something. Malcolm's eyes remained fixed on the cabinet. He knows a great deal too. He nodded toward me. I hated games like that. Men who possess information often use it the way weak men use guns. They pointed at people. I lowered the handgun slightly. Tell us. Malcolm finally looked at me. My grandfather did not begin the cover-up, then who did? A man named Charles Vane. The name meant nothing to Samuel. It meant something to me only because Malcolm expected it to. Samuel frowned. Federal? Yes. I watched Malcolm carefully. You're telling us a federal official helped Hawthorne conceal the deaths of federal inspectors? No. Malcolm's expression hardened. I'm telling you a federal official ordered Hawthorne to conceal them. That changed the air in the room. Ray Delaney leaned against the wall behind us. He looked terrible but conscious. Samuel whispered, Why? Malcolm nodded toward the cabinet. Open it. I stepped closer. The lock was newer than the cabinet. Not modern, but newer. Someone had replaced it years after the explosion. I searched the shelves for tools. Samuel handed me the pry bar. I believe you left your religion over there. Under any other circumstances I might have laughed. I worked the bar behind the locking plate. The steel bent slowly. Rook watched every movement. Then the lock snapped free. The doors opened. No trap, no hidden explosion, just paper. 3 document boxes, a metal film canister, a leather briefcase, and a small portable tape recorder wrapped inside an oilcloth cover. On the lid was a typed label, Bellwether Special Inspection, November 1972. The second box read, Field Photographs. The third, Personnel Statements. I took out the leather briefcase. The brass clasp had corroded. Inside was a wallet, a wedding ring, a pair of eyeglasses, an identification card. The photograph showed a man in his 40s with a narrow face and serious eyes. His name was Arthur Keene, federal mine safety investigator. Samuel leaned over my shoulder. One of the 8? Looks that way. I found a folded sheet tucked behind the identification card, handwritten. The ink was faded. I read the first line. If this is found, the Bellwether explosion was not an accident. Samuel whispered, Read it, I continued. Arthur Keene wrote that his inspection team had entered Bellwether No. 4 mine after receiving repeated complaints from miners about illegal excavation behind a sealed barrier. The company had been warned not to cut into that section. Mining there risked methane accumulation and roof failure. But that was not the only problem. Keene had received evidence that Hawthorne was falsifying production figures. Coal was being removed from restricted ground and recorded as coming from a legal section of the mine. Money explained part of it. Then the letter became stranger. 3 days before the explosion, Keene learned the illegal workings extended beneath federal land. Land the company did not own. Hawthorne had been stealing coal, millions of dollars worth. Samuel gave a quiet laugh. Men died over stolen coal, Malcolm answered, not just coal. I continued reading. Keene's team had found barrels stored in a sealed side chamber, industrial chemical waste, solvents, heavy metals, material from manufacturing plants owned by Hawthorne's parent company. The company had been dumping it underground to avoid disposal costs. Samuel stared at Malcolm. You poisoned the mine too? I was 14 years old, your family. Yes, Samuel shook his head. Malcolm accepted it. No argument. No excuse, I continued. Keene had planned to shut the operation down the following morning. He contacted his regional director, Charles Vane. That was the mistake. According to the letter, Vane ordered the team to delay action until he arrived. Instead, Vane contacted Hawthorne. Hours later, someone restarted electrical equipment in the prohibited section. A spark ignited methane. The explosion followed. Samuel whispered, "They caused it?" Malcolm looked away. I read further. Keene believed the explosion itself might still have been accidental, but everything afterward was not. The 8 inspectors had been in a side tunnel. 1 died immediately. Several were injured. The remaining members of the inspection team reached the underground medical ward along with the miners. Then Vane arrived. He told Hawthorne that if the presence of federal inspectors became public, the illegal operation, dumping scheme, and stolen mineral rights would all be exposed. More importantly, Vane himself would be implicated because he had ignored earlier complaints, so they created another casualty list, one without the inspectors. Samuel said 7. I nodded. 7 inspectors dead or dying. 1 survivor, Arthur Keene. The scratched message on the hatch suddenly made sense in a way I had not expected. If they say 7, they lied. The official report said 7 miners died. The number 7 had been used as a substitution. 7 official dead. 7 hidden federal investigators. A number turned into camouflage. I kept reading. Keene wrote that Roland Mercer found him inside the lower equipment chamber. Roland hid him, brought water, tried to get him outside. But company security searched the tunnels. Keene knew he would not make it through the main exit. So Roland moved him into the archive room, the very room where we were standing. Yes, Samuel looked at him. How do you know? Malcolm's face changed. Because my father told me. Another Rowe, another generation. Your father was Amos's son? Richard Rowe. He was 29 when it happened. Was he involved? Malcolm hesitated. Yes. Samuel stepped forward. How? He supervised company security. The room became very quiet. Malcolm did not deny it. He led the men who caught Roland trying to move Daniel. Samuel's jaw tightened. If he were alive, he isn't. Convenient. Not for me. The answer came with more pain than anger. For the first time I saw something beneath Malcolm's arrogance. Not goodness, not repentance. A son who had inherited a crime before he inherited the company. That did not absolve him, but it explained the shape of him. I looked back at Keene's letter. The final paragraph said Roland promised to return with help. He never did. Keene waited in darkness. Hours passed. Then another person arrived. Richard Rowe, Malcolm's father. Samuel read over my shoulder. His breathing changed. According to Keene, Richard was carrying a gun. Keene believed he had come to kill him. Instead, Richard gave him the portable tape recorder and told him to speak. Malcolm closed his eyes. Samuel looked at the recorder inside the cabinet. Your father helped him? For one night. Why? Because he saw what my grandfather had done. Samuel laughed bitterly. Then he found a conscience? For one night, Malcolm repeated. That sentence mattered. Conscience is easy to admire when we imagine it as permanent. Sometimes courage lasts 1 hour. Sometimes one decision. Sometimes a frightened man does one decent thing before spending the rest of his life running from it. I picked up the tape recorder. Old buttons, reels inside a plastic window. The batteries had long since died, but the tape remained. Ray whispered, "Think it still works?" "Recorder won't." "The tape? Maybe." Malcolm said, "It does." I turned toward him. "You listened to it?" "Once." "When?" "1998. Samuel's eyes widened. "You knew all this for almost 30 years? Malcolm's face hardened again. "Yes." "And you buried it?" "No excuses. Almost worse." I asked, "What is on the tape?" "Your grandfather?" "Yes." "Charles Vane?" "Yes." "Your father?" Malcolm continued. "Keene says Roland Mercer tried to save the injured men. A man's father had been condemned in his mind for less than an hour. Yet even that hour had cut him open. Now the truth gave him relief, but relief does not erase pain. It simply changes what the pain means." I asked Malcolm, "Why didn't you release this in 1998? He stared at me, as if the answer were obvious. "Because by then my father had spent 26 years building our company out of the ruins." "Not good enough," he nodded. "It isn't. Try again." "My father was dying. We employed almost 4,000 people across 3 states. You think I don't know that? Knowing didn't stop you." "It stopped me sleeping," Samuel said. "Poor man." Malcolm accepted that too. "My father begged me to destroy everything." "Did you?" "No, I couldn't, but you kept it buried." "Yes." I understood him then. Not forgave, understood. Some men preserve evidence because they intend to tell the truth. Others preserve it because destroying it would make the lie final. Malcolm had spent nearly 30 years living in the space between cowardice and confession. The documents remained because some part of him wanted to be caught. Then I noticed something. "Why did you come tonight with demolition charges?" Malcolm looked at me. "Because Gideon found the tape 3 weeks ago. So that was the trigger." "What did he do?" "He confronted me. And I told him the same thing my father told me. Destroy it, protect the family. Gideon had offered me money, threatened me, tried to scare me away. At first he had repeated the family pattern, then something had changed. I looked toward the tunnel. He called federal investigators." Malcolm nodded. "He finally did what I could not." Samuel stared at him. "You sound proud." "I am." "Then why are you here trying to bury him with the rest of us?" Malcolm looked toward the cabinet. "Because courage is easier to admire when it does not destroy everything you built." There it was, the human answer, ugly because it was honest. He had wanted his son to be better, just not at his expense. Rook stood suddenly. Footsteps approached through the tunnel. I raised the handgun. A voice called, "Federal agents, identify yourself." I kept the weapon down. "Wade Callahan, 3 civilians with me, 1 detained subject." Malcolm gave me a look. "Detained? You were trying to detonate a mine." "Fair." Agents entered. Body armor, helmets, lights, weapons raised. The first man ordered me to place the handgun on the floor. I did. Then he secured Malcolm. Ray lifted both hands. Rook remained beside me. 1 agent saw him. "Control the dog. He's controlled." Rook sat. The agent lowered his weapon slightly. We were escorted from the archive. At the relief ward, more agents appeared. Medics reached Ray. He resisted until Samuel told him to stop being stupid. That worked better than medical authority. When we climbed through the baggage room, the station looked completely different. Emergency lights flashed through the broken windows. Vehicles filled the old tracks. Agents photographed everything. One of Malcolm's men lay on a stretcher with his injured knee immobilized. Another sat handcuffed against a vehicle. The man who had fallen through the weakened loading platform had survived with a broken leg. Rook walked outside. I followed. Cold air hit my face. Quiet mountains. Rook crossed toward the creek. I knelt, removed the canvas pouch from his harness. The documents were still there. Dry, safe, good boy. His tail moved. Then he pressed his forehead against my chest. I wrapped both arms around him, did not care who saw. Behind me, someone called my name. Gideon. He stood beside a federal vehicle. An agent had taken his phone but had not handcuffed him. I walked over. Rook stayed with me. Gideon looked at the pouch. "He made it." "Yeah, I heard shots." "So did he." Gideon looked at Rook. "I'm sorry. For what?" "My father ordered them to shoot him." "You didn't. I threatened your daughter." I stared at him. "That one we're not done with." He nodded. "I know." "You thought threatening family would make me cooperative?" I panicked. Poor choice. "Yes, I studied him." "What made you call federal investigators?" He looked toward the station. "My grandmother died last month. I waited. She left me a letter." "What did it say?" "That my grandfather confessed to her before he died." Gideon's voice lowered. She spent the rest of her life asking my father to tell the truth. Malcolm refused, every time. Why didn't she? She was afraid. He looked ashamed to say it. Then she became ill. By the time she decided fear wasn't enough anymore, she could barely speak. So she wrote you. Yes, what changed? Gideon looked at me. She wrote one sentence I couldn't get out of my head. What? He swallowed. She said a family secret does not stay buried. It becomes an inheritance. I understood that, more than I wanted to. Aaron Voss had become part of my inheritance, not because he belonged to my family, because guilt does not need blood to pass from one version of a man to the next. Gideon continued. I found the tape. I found the records. I confronted my father, then offered me money. Yes, not exactly hero behavior. No, then threatened me. Yes, still worse, I know. So what finally changed? White hair visible through the window. He told me he was going to demolish the depot tomorrow night. Without knowing I'd buy it. He had arranged for the county to transfer it to one of our holding companies. But I bought it first. An employee missed the filing deadline. I almost laughed. 54 years of silence disrupted by bureaucracy. Sometimes history turns on less. Gideon said, when you bought the property, my father told me to fix it, meaning buy me out. Yes, and if I refused? Gideon looked away. I don't know what he would have done. You do. He looked back. Yes, that answer mattered. I was about to ask another question when Samuel walked toward us. His father's statement was folded inside a clear evidence sleeve. An agent had apparently allowed him to keep looking at it for a minute before cataloging it. Samuel stopped in front of Gideon. You, Richard Rowe's grandson? Yes. Samuel looked at him for a long time. Gideon seemed prepared for anger. Maybe a fist. Samuel did neither. My father tried to save Daniel. Gideon nodded. I know. Your grandfather stopped him. Yes. And your father knew. Yes. Samuel looked toward Malcolm. Then your family got 54 years with their dead. Gideon frowned. Samuel continued. You knew where your people were buried. His voice shook. We didn't. That landed. Gideon lowered his eyes. Samuel said, that's the difference. Then he walked away. No speech, no forgiveness. He did not owe one. I followed him toward the creek. He stood beside the old railbed. What now? He asked. Agents process the archive. No. He looked at the dark station. I mean, Daniel, I understood. We find the lower east shaft. Samuel nodded. If there are bodies, there are. How can you be sure? Because men worked this hard to keep us away. He breathed out slowly. I want to bring him home. You will. He looked at me. You shouldn't promise things you can't control. He was right, so I corrected myself. We'll try better. Rook walked between us. Samuel scratched his damaged ear. I thought you said you never believed Hawthorne. I didn't believe them. He looked toward the mountains. But after enough years, doubt gets in. I knew, he continued. You start thinking maybe everybody else knows something you don't. His voice cracked. Maybe your mother is wrong. Maybe your father is lying. Maybe you're the fool. Rook pressed against his leg. Samuel put a hand on the dog's head. They didn't just take Daniel. No, they took what we remembered about him. That was the crime people rarely count. When someone controls the official story long enough, families begin defending their own memories. Was he really working that night? Did she really see him? Did he really say that? Maybe we were wrong. Maybe the company was right. A lie repeated by institutions becomes heavier than a truth carried by one old woman at a kitchen table. I thought about Emily. You always say soon. Her words came back. I had used different methods, but I had buried pieces of my own history too. Not illegal, not cruel, still buried. Maybe silence changes shape depending on who is doing it. Maybe it always charges interest. My phone rang. Emily. I answered immediately. Hey, Dad. Her voice came fast. Police came by. Are you okay? I'm okay. That means something happened. Yes, are you hurt? No. Rook? I looked down. He's fine, she exhaled. Thank God. I smiled. Rook heard his name and looked at the phone. Emily continued. What is going on? I glanced at the station. Samuel standing beside 54 years of grief. I bought a train station. Silence. Then my daughter said, You what? For $500. Another silence. Are you having some kind of episode? Samuel heard and laughed. It was the first real laugh I had heard from him. No, I said. Well, maybe a small one, Dad. I found something here. What? History. That is not an answer, I know. I looked toward the mountains. You asked when I'd explain everything. She became quiet, I remember. I meant it. Tonight? Tonight. So I told her, not every detail, not yet. I told her about the station, Rook finding the hatch. Samuel, the miners, Gideon. The threat, she listened. When I reached the part about the gunfire, she interrupted. Someone shot at Rook? Yes, do you have their name? I almost smiled. That's my girl, I'm serious, so am I. Then her voice changed. Dad, why are you involved in this? It was a reasonable question. I looked toward Samuel. He had walked away to give me privacy, because somebody needed to stay. That's what you always say. She was right. Missions. Emergencies. Men who needed help. The world always offered me a reason not to come home. I know, I rubbed my face, but this is different. How? I thought about Aaron, about the knocking, about how I had spent years believing that leaving the wall had made me a man who abandoned people. The Navy told me I had saved 4 lives. My nightmares told me I had left one. Both were true. Maybe healing was not choosing one version. Maybe it was learning to carry both, because this time I said, I'm not using the mission to run away. Emily did not answer for a moment. Then she asked, what happens when it's over? The old answer would have been, I don't know. Keep moving. Find work. Maybe another town, another parking lot, another cheap room. I looked at Cinder Gap Station. $500. Broken roof, rotten floor, cold rooms. A building people had abandoned because they thought it had nothing left to offer. I think I fixed the roof. Emily laughed. Not because the answer was funny, because she understood. You staying there? Maybe. Is there plumbing? Technically, there's evidence water has existed on the property. Dad, we'll improve it, we? I looked at Rook. He had begun sniffing along the creek bank again. Me and the contractor, she knew exactly who I meant. I'd like to see it. The sentence hit harder than I expected. The station? Yes, when? Maybe next weekend. I said nothing. Dad, next weekend would be good. Noah will want to come, my grandson. The boy who mostly knew me from late birthday cards. You sure? Yes, okay. A small word, but something inside me shifted. Then Rook barked. Not an alarm bark, a working bark. I turned. He stood approximately 50 yards down the creek beside a collapsed stone retaining wall. His nose was near the ground. Samuel noticed too. He walked over. Rook scratched at a section of earth, then barked again. I ended the call with Emily after promising to call back. Samuel and I approached. A federal agent followed. Rook moved toward an opening partly hidden by brush. Old timbers, stone, an air shaft, the western air shaft, the same one Rook had used to carry the records out. But now he was smelling something beside it. The agent aimed a flashlight into the opening. Dog alerting? Yes. For what? I looked at Rook's posture. Not living scent, not exactly. He had worked human remains before. Possibly remains. Samuel gripped my arm. The agent called for the forensic team. They cleared brush, removed loose stone. Then one of them found metal beneath the soil. A rail, old mine track. The entrance had been deliberately buried. We waited while specialists assessed stability. An hour passed, maybe more. Nobody complained. Near midnight, an engineer emerged. He spoke to the lead investigator, then Samuel. The tunnel is partially collapsed, but accessible. Samuel asked the only question that mattered. Did you find anyone? The engineer hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. Samuel closed his eyes. How many? We can see multiple sets of remains. We will not know the number until recovery. Any identification? Not yet. Samuel reached into his pocket. He removed the old photograph Lorraine had given him. Daniel stood there at 24 years old, smiling, hand on his brother's shoulder. Samuel stared at it. He's down there. I put a hand on his back. He did not cry. What? We found an old emergency stretcher near the entrance. Samuel frowned. The engineer continued. There's a metal identification plate attached. My pulse changed. What name? The engineer looked down at his notes. Daniel Mercer. Samuel's knees almost gave. I caught him. He gripped my coat. For more than half a century his brother had been missing. Now a metal plate beneath a mountain had spoken his name. Daniel had not abandoned them. He had not run away. He had been there the entire time. Samuel finally cried. Quietly. Like an old man who had spent too many years believing tears could not change anything. You found him. Rook held Samuel, repeated it. You found my brother. I turned away. Some moments belonged to the people who waited for them. Then a federal investigator approached me. Her expression told me the night was not over. Mr. Callahan? Yes, we need to speak privately. I followed her toward one of the vehicles. She held a clear evidence bag. Inside was a document recovered from the locked cabinet. I understand Malcolm Rowe told you 7 federal inspectors died. Yes, that appears to be true. We located personnel records matching Arthur Keen's statement. Okay, she paused. But there is a problem. Of course there was. What? One of the 8 inspectors listed in the Bellwether file was not Arthur Keen. I frowned. What do you mean? Keen was part of the team, but the records show 2 investigators survived the initial explosion. Keen and who? She held up the evidence bag. Inside was a photograph, 8 men outside the mine, names written beneath them. One had been circled, Charles Vane. I stared. The regional director? Yes. Malcolm, said Vane arrived afterward. According to this record, he was already underground. The ground seemed to shift again. So Keen's letter is wrong? Maybe. Or someone wanted everyone to believe Charles Vane was outside the mine when the explosion happened. I looked back toward Malcolm's vehicle. The old man was watching us through the glass. The investigator continued. We found another statement. From who? Arthur Keen. I read this one was written later. She handed me a photocopy. At the top was a date, 4 days after the explosion. I read the first line. Charles Vane did not betray us. Then who ordered the cover-up? The investigator looked toward the station. We believe the answer is in the final pages of Keen's statement. I read. Keen described waking inside the archive room. Roland Mercer had hidden him. Richard Robe brought him the tape recorder. Then Charles Vane entered, alive, injured. Vane had survived the explosion. He had crawled through a ventilation tunnel, and he brought evidence. Not evidence against Keen. Evidence against a man in Washington who had been receiving money from Hawthorne for years, a federal official with authority over mine inspections across several states. Vane intended to expose him. Before he could, company security found the archive. The statement ended abruptly. One final sentence had been written at the bottom. If Charles does not leave Bellwether, look for him with the miners. I stared at the page. Another man buried. Another family lied to. Another name erased. I looked at Malcolm. He knew. Of course he knew. I walked to the vehicle. The agent beside it tried to stop me. I told him I only needed one question. He allowed Malcolm's window to open several inches. I held up Keen's statement. You lied about Vane. Malcolm's eyes closed. You said he ordered the cover-up. No answer. We tried to expose it. Still nothing. Why protect the real man? Malcolm slowly opened his eyes. Because that man's family is still powerful. Name. No, Malcolm. You think tonight changed the world? His voice was tired. You found dead miners. You found old records. You arrested an old man. Name. He leaned closer to the glass. You are standing at the edge of a grave, Wade. You have no idea how much larger it is. I felt anger rising. Then Rook barked behind me. I turned. Samuel stood beside the newly opened shaft, agents around him. The place where his brother had waited for 54 years. That was what mattered. Not Malcolm's drama, not powerful names, not fear disguised as wisdom. Evidence existed now. The truth did not need Malcolm's permission. I looked back at him. You know what your family's mistake was? He stared. You thought the truth needed one brave man. I nodded toward the station. It doesn't. Agents were photographing documents. Investigators were copying files. Forensic teams were entering the mine. Samuel Mercer was holding his brother's photograph. Gideon was giving a formal statement. Ray was being loaded into an ambulance. Rook was sitting beside an opening nobody had managed to keep hidden forever. All it needs, I said, is enough people who refuse to put it back. Malcolm said nothing. I stepped away. Then the lead investigator called me. Mr. Callahan. I turned. She held another evidence folder. We found the name. I walked back. Whose? The federal official Keen and Vane were investigating. She opened the folder. I read it. The name meant nothing to me. But the title did. Deputy Administrator for Mine Enforcement. A man with power over investigations, inspectors, accident reports, and regional appointments. A man who had died decades ago. There would be no trial for him, no handcuffs, no courtroom confession. But beneath his name were payment records. Hawthorne Coal and Iron, cash transfers, shell corporations, political donations, years of them. Then I saw the final notation. My breath stopped. The payments did not end in 1972, they continued. 1980, 1991, 2003, 2019. Different company names, different recipients, same financial chain. This was not merely an old cover-up. Someone had been paying to protect Cinder Gap long after every original criminal should have been dead. I looked at the investigator. Who received the most recent payment? She turned the page. A company name. I recognized it. Not Hawthorne. Not Rowe, the engineering contractor scheduled to begin sealing the Bellwether tunnels the following month. They were not coming to discover the evidence. They had been hired to destroy the last physical trace of it, and according to the records, one payment had been authorized only 6 days earlier, by someone whose signature was clearly visible at the bottom of the page. Gideon Rowe. I looked across the flashing lights. Gideon stood beside another investigator, giving his statement, cooperating, looking for the first time all night, like a man who believed he had chosen the truth. But the paper in my hand said 6 days before I bought Cinder Gap Station, Gideon Rowe had personally approved the money intended to seal the mine forever. Rook came to my side. I rested my hand on his neck. Gideon looked across the yard. Our eyes met. He saw the document in my hand, and whatever relief had been on his face disappeared. I knew then that we had found the dead. We had found the lie. But we still had not found the entire truth. Gideon Rowe saw the paper in my hand. He knew immediately what I had found. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Federal lights flashed red and blue across the side of Cinder Gap Station. Rook stood beside my leg. Samuel was still near the mine opening where investigators had found Daniel's identification plate. Malcolm sat inside the government vehicle, and Gideon stood 30 yards away with the expression of a man who had just realized the truth had finally outrun him. I walked toward him. He did not run. That mattered. But not enough. The investigator beside Gideon stepped between us. Mr. Callahan. I held up the evidence sheet. Ask him about this. Gideon lowered his eyes. The investigator took the page. She read the authorization, then looked at him. You approved this payment? Gideon answered quietly. Yes. 6 days ago? Yes. To Blackridge Engineering? Yes. For stabilization and permanent closure of Bellwether No. 4? Yes. The investigator's voice hardened. Did you understand the work would destroy access to potential evidence? Gideon did not answer Mr. Rowe. Yes, I felt something inside me go cold. Not rage. Disappointment. That was worse. Everything Gideon had said about choosing the truth suddenly sounded like another performance. You called federal agents into it, I said. Yes. But 6 days ago you paid somebody to seal the mine. Yes. Which version of you am I talking to? His eyes came up. Both. I laughed once. I don't have much patience left for complicated answers. You think I do? Then make it simple. Gideon looked toward the station. When my grandmother died, she left me the letter. You told me. I found the tape 3 weeks later. You told me that too. I confronted my father, then threatened me. Yes. Keep going. He rubbed both hands over his face. I wanted the problem gone. There it was. Not noble, not flattering. Probably true. I told myself the people responsible were dead. Not all of them. I know that now. You knew there were bodies, I suspected. That's not good enough. No, he swallowed. I thought sealing the mine was the least destructive choice. For whom? My employees, my family, the town. Samuel had walked close enough to hear. He said, Don't put the town in that sentence. Gideon turned. Samuel continued. The town already paid. Gideon nodded. Samuel's voice sharpened. No, don't do that. Do what? Agree like that fixes anything. Gideon said nothing. Samuel pointed toward the mine. My mother died wondering if her son hated her. His hand trembled. My brother's boys grew up believing their father abandoned them. He pointed toward Malcolm's vehicle. Your people had their houses, their companies, their lawyers. Then he pointed down. We had a hole in the mountain. Gideon's face tightened. Samuel stepped closer. Don't tell me you were protecting Bellwether. Gideon lowered his eyes. I was protecting myself. That answer stopped Samuel, maybe because it was finally honest. Gideon continued. I signed the closure authorization because I thought once the tunnels were sealed, no one could reopen this. And then? I asked. Then your name appeared on the property transfer. $500 ruined the plan. Yes. Despite everything, Samuel muttered, County finally got something right. I ignored him. What happened after I bought the depot? My father ordered me to acquire it. So you came with money? Yes. Then more money? Yes. And when that failed? Gideon looked at me. I used Emily. My jaw tightened. I didn't order anyone near her. You used her name? Yes. You made me believe my daughter might be hurt. I know. No. I stepped closer. You know the sentence. You don't know what it did. Rook moved with me, not aggressive, just present. Gideon looked at him, then back at me. I deserve whatever you think of me. This isn't about what I think. I pointed toward the investigators. It's about what you did. He nodded. I know. The lead investigator approached. Mr. Rowe, did you authorize the Blackridge contract with the intent to conceal evidence of criminal activity? Gideon hesitated. This was the moment. Men reveal themselves in hesitation, not because fear makes them guilty, because hesitation shows what they are measuring. Family, prison, money, reputation, truth. Gideon looked toward his father. Malcolm watched through the vehicle window. For almost 50 years that old man had been the direction of Gideon's compass. I could see it. Even now, the instinct to protect him had not disappeared. Then Gideon looked toward the mine entrance, toward Samuel, toward Daniel's stretcher tag. Yes, he said. The investigator remained still. Yes, what? I knew the closure could destroy evidence. Samuel closed his eyes. Gideon continued. I authorized it anyway. The investigator called another agent. Gideon did not resist when they placed him in handcuffs. That surprised me. Samuel watched. I expected satisfaction on his face. There was none. Truth is rarely as satisfying as revenge stories promise. Nobody gets younger. Nobody comes back. A handcuff does not return 54 Christmases. It only stops the lie from walking forward untouched. As Gideon was led away, he looked at me. Wade. I almost ignored him. Then I stopped. What? Blackridge isn't coming next month. What do you mean? They moved the schedule. When tomorrow? The investigator turned sharply. Gideon continued. My father ordered them to begin before dawn. How many people know? I don't know. Can they reach the mine from another entrance? Yes. Ray Delaney, being loaded into the ambulance nearby, heard us. He pushed himself upright, north ventilation portal. The medic tried to make him lie down. Ray swore at him. Samuel walked over. What north portal? Ray pointed toward the ridge. Other side of Bellwether, still open, service access. Agents moved. Radios came alive. The night that had seemed finished was moving again. I asked Gideon, what are they supposed to do? Seal the east shaft. Where the bodies are, yes. Samuel's face went white. Can they do it remotely? Ray answered. Some of the charges could already be staged. I looked at Gideon. Are they? I don't know. That's getting old. I never visited the site. Who managed it? Gideon looked toward his father. Malcolm. Of course. The old man's window was closed now. He sat in the back seat with his eyes forward. I walked to him. The agent guarding the vehicle tried to stop me. The lead investigator allowed it. Malcolm lowered the window. His expression was calm again. You signed off on explosives at the east shaft, I said. He said nothing. Are they already placed? No answer. Men are going in there to recover bodies. Still nothing. Samuel's brother is down there. Malcolm looked toward Samuel. Then back at me. Do you believe I wanted this? I stared at him. You lost the right to ask that question decades ago. His eyes narrowed. Everything I did was to protect what my father built. There are bodies under your father's work, I know. Then answer me. He hesitated. That was enough. They're already placed. Timer? No. Remote? Yes. Who has it? He closed sight foreman. Name, Victor Dane. The investigator wrote it down. How far away? Malcolm answered. Maybe 30 minutes. Agents would have to reach the north side of the mine before Blackridge did. Maybe they could. Maybe they couldn't. The investigator ordered everyone except law enforcement away from the station. Samuel refused. You are not going underground, she told him. My brother is down there, which is why you are staying here. I waited 54 years, and another 30 minutes won't kill you. Samuel stared at her. She stared back. He finally nodded. I liked her. Then she looked at me. You too, I'm the property owner. Congratulations. I heard Safamshel snort, she continued. Stay here. I raised both hands or stood. I meant it mostly. The federal tactical team left for the ridge. The forensic crew exited the mine. For the first time since Gideon arrived, there was nothing to do. That was when the adrenaline left me. My shoulder began throbbing. My face hurt where I had been struck. My ribs felt bruised. Rook limped slightly. I noticed immediately. Come here. He approached. I crouched, checked his front legs. Nothing. Back legs. A scrape along the right rear paw. Probably from the air shaft. You're getting too old for this. Rook licked my chin. Don't argue. Samuel sat on the loading platform. I joined him. Rook lay between us. For a long time we listened to radios. Samuel looked toward the mine. You got children? One daughter. Grandchildren? One grandson. Close? The question was simple. The answer was not. Not as close as I should be. Samuel nodded. Fix that. I'm working on it. No. He looked at me. Don't work on it. I waited. Do it. His gaze returned to the mountain. Men spend their whole lives saying there's time. His voice softened. My mother thought there'd be time to ask Daniel why he left. He didn't. Didn't matter. She didn't know. Samuel rubbed his hands together. My father thought there'd be time to tell me what really happened. There wasn't. No. He looked at me again. Don't keep things from your girl because you're waiting to become the version of yourself you think she deserves. That one went deep. I said nothing. Samuel continued. Kids don't need the finished version. She's 40, still your kid. Fair. I looked at my phone. 2 missed calls from Emily. I called her. She answered immediately. You said you'd call, I know. Are you all right? Yes, that sounded convincing. I'll work on delivery. What happened? So I told her more, not classified things, not old operation details, the personal part. Aaron, the collapse, the decision. I had never told her the whole story. She knew I had lost someone. She did not know I heard him alive behind the wall. She did not know I ordered the team back. She did not know why certain sounds could still take me out of a room. When I finished, Emily was quiet. I almost apologized. Then she said, Dad, why didn't you ever tell me? I thought I was protecting you. From what, me? She breathed out. That's not how that works. I know. No, I don't think you do. I let her continue. You disappearing doesn't make us worry less. I closed my eyes. It makes us imagine worse things. That hurt because it was true. I didn't want Noah seeing me like that. Like what? I almost laughed. Maybe. Dad. Yeah, Noah doesn't need a Navy SEAL. I looked at Rook. He needs his grandfather. I could not answer right away. Emily said, You still there? Yeah. Good. She sounded close to crying. So was I. I'll see you next weekend. You're serious? I'm serious. Even if the station doesn't have plumbing? Especially then. Noah thinks outhouses are historical adventures. Tell him not to get excited, she laughed. Then she said, I love you. I love you too. When the call ended, Samuel was watching me. What? Nothing. You were listening. I'm old, not deaf. I shook my head. He smiled, then Rook's head came up. A distant boom rolled over the mountain. Samuel stood. The valley became silent. Radio traffic erupted. I was on my feet before anyone told me anything. Another boom. From the North Ridge. Samuel whispered, They did it. No. An agent listened to his radio, then shouted toward the investigator, Premature detonation at the North Portal. Samuel grabbed my arm. The bodies? No word. The radio crackled again. Blackridge crew detained. One charge had detonated during attempted disarmament. No federal injuries. East shaft status unknown. Samuel looked at me. They need to check. They will. Minutes passed. Long minutes. The kind that make clocks feel insulting. She spoke to him first. The east shaft is intact. His shoulders dropped. The recovery area was not affected. He closed his eyes. Thank you. She nodded. One of our teams found the main detonator before the foreman could activate it. I glanced toward Malcolm. He had heard. For the first time that night, the old man looked truly defeated. Not because he was going to jail, because the mountain had finally refused to cooperate. The dead were staying available to the living. The next few days blurred together. I slept little, not because of nightmares, because Cinder Gap filled with people. Federal investigators, forensic specialists, mine engineers, county officials who suddenly remembered the depot existed. News crews arrived by the second morning. I avoided them. Samuel did not. That surprised everyone. He stood in front of cameras wearing the same brown work jacket and held Daniel's photograph. He did not give a speech. He said his brother had gone to work on November 18, 1972, and had never come home. Then he said the sentence his mother had deserved to hear. Daniel Mercer did not leave his family. That was enough. Within days, other families came, children who were now grandparents, widows, nephews, nieces, people carrying photographs in envelopes. Some names from the ledger still had living relatives in Bellwether. Others arrived from Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Virginia. They came to the station because there was nowhere else to go. She told them where they could put their regulations. No one stopped her after that. Recovery took time. Careful time. The lower east shaft had partially collapsed decades earlier. Engineers could not simply walk in and carry people out. They stabilized sections, mapped chambers, documented everything. One by one, remains emerged. Some were identified through dental records. Others through personal effects, a wedding band, a watch, a belt buckle, a lunch tin with initials scratched beneath the handle. Daniel Mercer was identified through dental records and the metal tag attached to the stretcher. Samuel called his nephews. I was there when he did. He did not know what to say, neither did they. After 54 years, language was too small. Eventually, Samuel whispered, "We found your dad." The man on the other end began crying. Samuel cried too. Rook sat between his feet. The final confirmed count from the lower chambers was 29, 22 miners, 7 members of the federal inspection team. Arthur Keene was not among them. That created another mystery. For 3 days, investigators believed he might have escaped. Then they found a second passage behind the archive room. Inside was a small chamber, 1 cot, empty water containers. The remains of one man, Arthur Keene. He had survived long enough to write statements, record testimony, and hide the evidence. Then he died alone within a few yards of the truth he hoped someone would eventually find. Rook located him. Of course he did. When the recovery team brought Keene out, one of the investigators removed his helmet. Then another did the same. Soon everyone standing on the platform had uncovered their heads. Samuel stood beside me, so the dog found 30 men. Samuel rubbed Rook's neck. Not bad for a mutt. Rook sneezed on him. I said, "Careful." Samuel smiled. Malcolm Rowe was charged. So was Gideon. So were several executives and contractors connected to the planned destruction of the site. I followed enough of the case to understand it would take years. Old crimes, dead suspects, destroyed records, jurisdiction questions, civil claims, environmental investigations. There would not be one clean courtroom moment where somebody explained everything. Life rarely gives those. The federal official Keene had been investigating was dead. Most original company officers were dead. Richard Rowe was dead. Roland Mercer was dead. Justice had arrived late enough that much of it would have to be symbolic. Samuel told me symbolic mattered. So does the difference between a grave and a ditch, he said. He was right. The families formed a committee to create a memorial. They asked whether they could use the old station. I said yes before they finished the question. That complicated my housing plan. The county condemned half the building again, then uncondemned portions of it. Then discovered historic preservation grants. The same people who had been willing to sell it for $500 began using phrases like cultural asset. I found that irritating. Lorraine found it hilarious. Emily and Noah arrived the following Saturday. I almost did not recognize my grandson when he got out of the car. Kids change faster from a distance. He was 9, tall for his age, brown hair sticking out beneath a baseball cap. He looked at the station, then me, then Rook. He ran to Rook first. I cannot blame him. Rook received more enthusiasm than I did. Emily hugged me, hard, longer than usual. She stepped back. "You look terrible." "Good to see you too. What happened to your face?" "Train station." She stared. "That's not how buildings work. This one is unusual." Noah ran toward us. "Grandpa, Mom," said Rook found buried people. Emily closed her eyes. I phrased it differently. I crouched. He helped find people who had been missing a long time, like treasure. I thought about that better. He frowned. "How?" "Because treasure belongs to whoever finds it." I pointed toward Samuel, who was speaking with his nephews by the platform. "Those people already belonged to someone." Noah considered this with the seriousness only children can bring to questions adults ruin by over-explaining. Then he nodded. "Can I see the tunnel?" "No." "Why?" "Because your mother would kill me," Emily said. "Correct." Noah accepted that. Mostly. We spent the afternoon cleaning the ticket office. Noah found an old brass button. Emily found a stack of railroad schedules. I found mouse evidence I chose not to identify out loud. For dinner, Lorraine brought fried chicken, biscuits, beans, and enough pie to damage several arteries. Samuel came. Ray came after leaving the hospital against advice. He had 6 stitches in his head and enjoyed showing them to Noah until Emily stopped him. For the first time in years, I sat at a table with people and did not spend the entire meal looking for the nearest exit. That sounds small. It wasn't. Later, Noah fell asleep beside Rook on an old sleeping bag. Emily and I sat on the platform. The mountains were black against the sky. She asked, "Are you really staying?" "I think so." "What will you do?" "Fix the depot." "With what money?" "Good question," she laughed. There were grants, donations. A roofing company donated materials. A local electrician offered to rewire the waiting room. Cinder Gap taught me that was another kind of vanity. People wanted to help. Sometimes accepting help was not weakness. Sometimes it gave somebody else a place to put their grief. By spring, the roof no longer leaked. By summer, the waiting room had become a small museum. The baggage room remained mostly unchanged. We repaired the floor around the hatch but left the iron cover visible. The scratched words remained. If they say 7, they lied. Underneath, we added a plaque explaining what they meant. Not everything, just enough. Names matter more than conspiracies. We placed the names of every recovered miner on one wall, the 7 federal inspectors on another, Arthur Keene beside them, and a separate plaque for people who tried to resist the cover-up, Roland Mercer, Richard Rowe. That one caused arguments. Samuel supported it. Man did wrong before he did right, he said. Still did right. I asked whether Malcolm's father deserved that. Samuel shook his head. Not my decision. Eventually, the memorial committee included Richard with wording that told the whole truth. Later preserved testimony that helped expose it. Complicated, human, accurate. Samuel said history should not need saints. Only names. That summer, Daniel Mercer was buried beside his mother. Hundreds attended. His 2 sons stood beside the grave. Samuel spoke. He said very little. He talked about Daniel teaching him how to fish, about Daniel stealing biscuits from their mother's kitchen, about Daniel being terrible at baseball but refusing to admit it. No mine, no corporation, no conspiracy until the very end. Then Samuel said, my brother was more than what was done to him. Daniel had spent 54 years as a mystery. Now he could become a brother again, a father, a boy who stole biscuits. That mattered. After the funeral, Samuel found me near 10 the cemetery gate. He handed me an envelope. What's this? Open it later. I don't like mysterious envelopes anymore. Take it. That night I opened it. Inside was a photograph of Samuel and Daniel as boys. On the back Samuel had written, for Wade and Rook. Some men find the lost. Some dogs refuse to let them stay that way. I put the photograph in the ticket office, not the museum, my room. By autumn, Emily visited twice a month, sometimes more. Noah began calling the station Grandpa's railroad house. He and Rook developed an arrangement that involved snacks I pretended not to notice. I still had nightmares. That did not magically stop. Aaron still knocked sometimes, 3 times, pause. 3 times. But something changed. In the old dreams I always stayed at the wall, trying to dig, trying to reverse time, trying to make a different decision. One night, months after Cinder Gap, the dream changed. Aaron knocked, I answered. Then instead of digging, I told him the truth. I couldn't get you out. The knocking stopped. I woke before dawn. Rook was lying beside the bed. I sat on the floor with him until sunrise. I did not feel cured. I do not trust that word. I felt present. That was enough. A year after the auction, the county asked me to speak at the formal dedication of the Cinder Gap Memorial and Archive. I refused. Then Emily told me to stop being difficult. So I agreed. The waiting room was full. Families, reporters, former miners, federal officials, children who had never known the men whose photographs hung on the walls. Samuel sat in the front row, Lorraine beside him, Emily and Noah near the aisle. Rook lay at my feet. I had written a speech, 3 pages. I folded it in my pocket and never opened it. Instead, I told them about the first day. About $500, the broken roof, the diner, the iron hatch. I did not talk about gunfire. I did not talk about being a SEAL. I talked about Rook. I said a dog had found an old floor, interesting enough that I had finally stopped looking only at my own problems. People laughed. Then I told them what I had learned, that there are many ways to bury a person. You can bury a body. You can bury a name. You can bury a report. You can bury a memory beneath so many official lies that even the family begins wondering whether it remembers correctly. But I had also learned something else. Buried is not the same as gone. Samuel looked at me. I continued. Sometimes the truth waits in a mountain. I looked down. Rook lifted his head. Sometimes it waits in an old file cabinet. People smiled. And sometimes it waits until one stubborn dog refuses to walk past the place where everybody else stopped looking. That received the biggest laugh. Rook wagged his tail once. Perfect timing. Afterward, an older woman approached me. Her father had been one of the hidden miners. She was almost 80. She touched my arm. I was 26 when Daddy disappeared. I did not know what to say. She smiled. You gave him back to me. I shook my head. No, ma'am. I looked toward Rook. He found the door. She crouched. Rook let her touch his face. She cried into his neck. He stayed perfectly still. That was Rook, a dog who could chase a man through darkness and then stand motionless while an old woman remembered her father. I suppose all of us carry more than one thing inside us. After everyone left, I locked the station. Snow had started. Not heavy, just enough to soften the tracks. Rook and I walked along the old railbed. He was 8 now, more gray around the muzzle, slower climbing stairs, still better company than most people. We reached the creek. The western air shaft had been permanently secured. A memorial marker stood nearby. I sat on a wooden bench. Rook lay beside me. For a while, I listened to the water. Emily followed. "You leaving without us?" she asked. "Thought you went back to the hotel." Noah forgot his glove. Noah held up both hands. I found it. Outstanding operation. He sat beside Rook. Emily sat beside me. For a moment, nobody spoke. Snow landed on Rook's fur. Noah brushed it away. Then he asked, "Grandpa, yeah? Are there more secrets under the station?" Emily gave me a warning look. I smiled. "I hope not." Rook's ears suddenly lifted. His nose turned toward the building. Noah's eyes widened. Rook heard something. Emily said, "Absolutely not." I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that does not hurt afterward. Rook looked at me. I scratched behind his crooked ear. "You're retired." His tail moved. Then he stood anyway. Of course he did. Some dogs never really retire. Some men don't either. The difference is that I finally understood I did not need another war. I did not need another mission to justify waking up. I had a daughter coming through the door. A grandson leaving gloves everywhere. An old station with a roof that still needed work. A town learning the names of its dead, and a German shepherd who apparently believed every strange smell in West Virginia required federal attention. That was enough. More than enough. I stood. Emily took my arm. Noah walked with Rook ahead of us. Together we headed back toward the lights of Cinder Gap Station. A year earlier, I had bought the place because it was cheap, and because I had nowhere else to go. I thought I was buying shelter. I was wrong. I had bought a place where 30 forgotten men could finally come home. And somehow, while helping them find their way back, Rook had brought me home too. Some truths arrive too late to punish everyone responsible, but that does not make them worthless. For Samuel and the other families, bringing those men home could never restore the years that were stolen from them, but it restored their names, their dignity, and the certainty that they had never simply walked away. And for Wade, the greatest lesson was simpler. A man does not have to erase his past before he is allowed to come home. Sometimes healing begins when he stops running from the people who still have a place for him. If this story stayed with you, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you do not miss the next story from our channel. Your support gives us a reason to keep telling stories about loyalty, sacrifice, second chances, and the remarkable dogs who sometimes lead people back to what matters most.